Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and as you can see to my left, I think it is on my screen, I'm joined by the one and only Mr. donHaize, aka Jack. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Awesome.
And yourself?
Yeah, like a bit of a... been sort of readying myself for this conversation. Some of you may have noticed that recently that I reacted to Jack's top 100 video game tracks, and then he then reacted to my reaction, and I think all in all it was quite a fun time. I had a good laugh watching back, not only myself making a lot of mistakes and saying some really dumb shit, as well as being quite stubborn in my ways, but also seeing Jack's response to a lot of that. And yeah, I kind of wanted to talk to him about it and go and ask him some questions about it, and just go through the list and kind of get some ideas and things. And a couple of things I just want to clarify before we get too deep into this. Like, one is that I realised that there are times in those videos I don't think I explained myself as well as I could have. So hopefully I can rectify that today with certain questions. And I also think some of my terminology was a bit crap. Like, I know emotional gets chucked around for like a lot of tracks, but as me and Jack have spoken about this since, it's kind of like any track can be emotional, so I should have been more specific and maybe say orchestrated or like sad feels and stuff like that. It's just things like that where I feel like maybe I didn't explain myself well. And but yeah, like I said, we can dive into all that. I guess my first question for you is, how fucking hard was it to do this list?
Very.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things I've done is taken me the culmination of like on and off 5 years of like messing around, like research. I think the research part took the longest. I think it took like, spending a couple of hours a week and over the course of like 3 years just finding the tracks to begin with. And then when I think I got the list, I'm like, right, okay, I got a pretty good idea of which ones are going to appear on the list. Like, I just play a new game that just comes out and I'm like, ooh, that's a really good soundtrack. Now I've got to go back and like find these tracks. And then like even games that I hadn't played, I started like really deep diving into stuff that I know people like, but perhaps I've never played or I've never been into those types of series. And then it starts opening a whole new can of worms. Like, oh god, okay, yeah, there's a load of tracks here that I could like are possibles. And yeah, it took a long time, and the ranking part was really hard. Like, especially when you have so many different genres of music. I think you'll touch on it anyway, but like things like what you consider video game music and what you consider like official tracks and soundtracks created for games, what is allowed on the list, what's not allowed on the list, and it can open a can of worms sometimes when you're going through it.
Yeah, there's a lot. And I will bring this up because there is stuff on this list that I wasn't expecting at all to show up, because I was like, you've never played this, or like So I was going to ask about like this research process, because that must have been quite a weird experience. Suddenly, I'm going to go check out all these really popular games, listen to the soundtracks, and then just be like, there's a lot of popular games. You know what I mean? Like, where did you draw the line?
I didn't really have a line to draw. It was a case of, I checked out a couple of other people's like top 100s. I think you did yours in between like my research stage. So I was like, oh, I had a couple of inspirations from there. For example, the Cannon Fodder theme, I'd never heard that before. And then when it played on your list, I'm like, holy crap, this is a great tune. I definitely thought it should be higher in your personal list. I'm like, right, that's a tune I'm going to add into my own list. I didn't know where it was going to sit. Obviously, that took a much longer, refined process. But I was like, oh, that's a really good track. And then there was a couple of like throughout the other people's, I'm like, yeah, I could probably check out, or even maybe not songs that were that good, but like songs that I thought, I like the style of this, maybe I'll just check out that soundtrack. And it may well have been that, some of these, there was nothing there that had my fancy or captured my interest. Not to say they're bad or anything, just wasn't my taste. And then, other things I was like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't like that particular track, but actually, of this playlist, there was like, 3 or 4 that I'm like, yeah, definitely check them out.
Nice.
And then from there, you check out the whole soundtrack of a particular game and like, yeah, okay, there's 3 tracks on there that I like.
Is there anything that on this list that was like an absolute guaranteed day one that has still been there since you started it?
Not day one, but I think quite early in the list. I started backwards. I started from 1 and worked my way up to 100.
Yeah.
and there was certain tracks that I found playing over and over and over again, which, you know, kind of made it a lot easier than because there's like certain tracks I'm like, right, okay, this has got to be in like probably somewhere in the top 30. And then I keep playing them and playing them, and I'm like, no, this is really like top 10 material. Yeah. And then it became quite apparent that I had like definite favorites. And those tracks were, to be honest, my top 3 tracks were solidified quite early on, and they never actually changed throughout the whole process. And that, my number 1 track, actually I'd never heard before.
Yeah.
I started this process.
Yeah.
It was a surprise to me, but I'm like, this has just got everything. This is an absolute masterpiece. And it took a little while. It's one of those songs that dawned on me. And like the more I played it, I'm like, yeah, no, this is just phenomenal. And I think for me as well, like there are certain themes that show up in my lists, and it's quite apparent actually what type of music I like. And it was a learning experience for me, very rewarding, because I knew like I understand now what type of music I like and what I look for in games, which is something I didn't really know. You know, previously to doing this, I'd just be like, oh, I like that track, like that track, but with no context behind it.
Yeah.
Now I can like put it in like, right, I understand what bits and what elements of these tracks I like and what like don't appeal to me, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean that makes complete sense to me. I mean, if you're spending X amount of time researching, like putting them in an order and then, you know, finding what works for you, you're going to, during that process, figure out what you like. You know, this selection of tracks really are the B's and E's for yourself, essentially. Doing it, because it's interesting you say you started at 1, because when I started my list, I already knew what my number 1 favorite track was. So for me, it was actually, I did the same thing. I was like, right, I know what 1 is, and I know where I want these other tracks, but then 100 to like 50 was actually really hard, because I was like, fuck, now I've got to like shuffle everything around. It's like, do I like this more than this? Do I like this more than this? You know, listen to it back to back and be like, no, this can't be this low, or this can't be this high. And that, and I found that, like, you know, sort of 20 to 1 wasn't as bad. It was difficult, but like 100 to 50 I found real tough myself. So it's interesting that you said that the first 3 tracks you were like pretty early on, you're locked in, and I think sometimes you just know, don't you, with certain tracks you just know, you're like, that's definitely going to be in the top 10.
The thing is, I knew I liked them. Some of them I'd not heard, and it's a very strange experience, because it's like when you're going through them, like some of the tracks that I thought something like Stronghold Towns was definitely going to be like a top 5. It didn't end up being in that position, but like that was my preconception going into it. And then as I like did my research, I found songs that I like kind of embrace that style, but then took it to a different, in my experience, a different level. Yeah, it was really interesting experience actually. The whole thing was like, you know, a learning curve.
Yeah, for sure.
And one of the things I'm so glad I did, my initial video on Premiere, probably like within the first 5 or 6 weeks, was about 12 hours long. And what I did was I split them into groups. So I kind of grouped similar songs. And I put them into like a space, and I'd have like a half an hour gap between the next set. And then I kind of like, that's how I started the list. It obviously got really big, very deeply shuffled after that, but it really helped me kind of like define different groups of tracks that had a similar feel or a similar sound or a similar instrumentation. And then it was quite easy then to like, rather than trying to manage 100 tracks and be like, right, you know, this is moving there, this is moving there. It was easier to micromanage smaller sections. And then you can kind of find your favorites within groups. And then you kind of find the style that works the best. And then you can kind of put them in groups. It was really useful for me.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me, because it's like, if anyone's watched the videos, they know it's really hard to judge, like, you know, taking a rock track and trying to judge that against a classical piece. Like, there has to be, you know, at the end of the day, if you're going to put it on a list, there's got to be a reason why you prefer one or the other, but also at the same time, they're 2 very different styles. So it's very difficult being like, hey, like, this is, if you've got all those sort of like, I don't know, set of piano pieces, set of like orchestrated pieces, set of rock tracks, that way you can kind of compare it to other stuff that's similar to it and be like, no, this really is much better than this stuff, and then compile it. But I mean, that's always the tough thing in it, is because like, I might hear something on this list and be like, that's an absolute banger, and then the next track I'm like, how have you put that over that? And like, I think that side of things is really interesting, and also quite difficult, because like, again, different, could be completely different instrumented track. You know, it might not just
Yeah.
you know. So
I found particularly difficult when we had really slow pieces that are very like there's not many instruments going on, and then have that try and rank that against something that was very hard, like Harkonnen, like the Tribute to Evil, a very heavy track, and then you compare that to something like Kingdom Hearts Dearly Beloved or Detroit Become Human Little One or Hopeful. They're very different tracks, but it's like just because a track's heavier or a little bit more actiony doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, make it better. But that was really hard to rank against each other, because it's like I can see why people would prefer something that's a little bit more actiony, a little bit more heavy. Whereas, a lot of the slower tracks, for me personally, I have a connection with them, not necessarily because of the games or nostalgia, but because it was very, I would say, emotional, but it's also very hard hitting. So yeah, those bits were quite hard, but even those kind of followed a theme, like even like the sort of very piano heavy tracks, the more instrumentation that sort of accompanied it kind of elevated those tracks. I think you even mentioned it quite a few times in your thing. I guess you could call it moving along. I would call it just sort of adding complexity to a track.
Yeah, there are. I mean, you said about that Detroit track. I think it was the one that was further down the list with the piano. And I was talking about this in the video because I was like, this does a very clever trick where it's like the piano isn't doing anything complicated. It is just playing arpeggiated chords. So you've got this mainstay, and it's like almost the focus of the track. And then you have the strings, which are really doing all the heavy lifting and are bringing that for lack of a better term, the feels, because when those strings come in and they get loud and then they go out and they get loud, and every time it's like bang, there's your feels, and like it does a really good job of complementing. And it's one of the hardest fucking things to do in music is to get reaction out of somebody who's listening to it, because everybody's different. So if you can take a simple concept of you've just got a steady melody, and then the other instruments are kind of doing all the hard work, like it's impressed. Not only is it impressive, but it's one of those things where even I was like, you know what, this might not be my favorite thing on the list, but I could really appreciate the thought process put into that track. And I was like, you know what, this is actually just a really, really well crafted piece of music, and they've really thought about how to get that kind of put on the heartstrings kind of vibe from it. And I'd never heard it before. Like, I didn't know much of the music from Detroit. So, and while I might not have been overly fond of the first one, I do think that particular track I was like, you know what, I've got so much respect for how simple but clever it is at the same time. And then there was a lot of stuff like that was on your list where I was like, okay, I might not necessarily choose to listen to this, but I can sure as hell respect the shit out of it, because as a musician myself, I really, really understand what they're trying to convey. I don't think I should have made that more apparent, I think, when I did the reaction, because even if I was like, yeah, it was alright, like, I was still trying to appreciate the tracks for what they were, and especially there were some ones on this list which really, like, just kind of hit. Not everything hit me like the same way it probably hits you, but there was, like, that Detroit track, I think, is a really good example of just kind of very powerful track. It's almost like it's the right amount of complexity, the right amount of simplicity, and it just hits all the right notes. And like, yeah, that was a really interesting piece of music, and it just kind of makes you respect the composers and stuff when they do stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
powerful melody as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. As we're talking about it, let me bring up the list, and I want to ask some questions about some of these tracks. I'm not going to go through every single one of them. If people want to see my reactions or watch Jack react to me, those videos are on his channel and mine. But yeah, I do want to let's start off with this Age of Wonders Perilous Quest track, because I don't know what I was expecting for a number 100, but I really like the way that this was just, to me, felt very out of the blue. I do remember the Age of Wonders games having fairly good soundtracks, but yeah, this game's what, late 90s or something and whatever, but I thought it was a really, really great way to start with something that I think threw me off. I was expecting like something orchestrated straight away, and that wasn't what we got, and I really liked this. So was this something you just remember playing, or was this something that you just went back and listened to the Age of Wonders stuff and was like, oh fuck, that's really good?
I remember Age of Wonders from playing it a long time ago, like when I was a wee lad. And one of the things I remember is the music. And Perilous Quest was one of my favorite tracks in that thing. So, I went back and played it, and the only thing I would say is its downfall is it's slightly too long, slightly overstays its welcome a little bit. I think if it was a little bit shorter, I think it could have been shunted up the list a little bit. But the track itself it's like that very like 90s MIDI.
Yeah.
And it turns out the composer, Mikhail Vandenbos, does a lot of tracks in that kind of style. And for some reason they just resonate because there was quite a lot of his tracks on this list. And yeah, I mean, Age of Wonders really has some incredible music. There was a lot of tracks on there that were very high up in my rankings, but not on the list, if that makes sense. Like they were close, but no cigars, really. But yeah, there's an entire soundtrack to listen to on Age of Wonders that is very interesting and very. It's kind of like that early orchestrated music because it's not orchestrated, but it's that MIDI feel kind of is as close as they had at the time, I suppose. Yeah,
they've tried to write it in the style of for an orchestra, or at least for somewhat of an orchestra, and used the sounds they had available at the time. So would you say that maybe 101 was like another Age of Wonders track? If this bumped something off the list, would it have been like another Age of Wonders track, do you think?
No, it wouldn't have been. There were quite a lot of tracks. I mean, there was a couple of StarCraft tracks that were very close to making this. There was a Harkonnen track that was also very close to making the top 100. And I think one of the Heroes 3, I think it was Tower Theme, and Inferno as well. Both were quite close to making it. In the end, I went with Necropolis Towns because I thought that was it was the right level of sort of harrowing, but also beautiful. It's just a really good blend of dark and light.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up something that I think was kind of a shock to me. I generally did expect more Heroes 3, not only because I was like, we've talked about the music in this game. I know that we both enjoy the game, but I know you've talked about the music before, so I was kind of surprised to see, we got Stronghold Town, which is obviously way down the list, and I completely expected that because I know how much you like that track. But I was kind of shocked maybe by, maybe not one of the battle themes or some of the other town themes. Like you said, obviously you've just explained there that they were obviously close to being in this, and I know that you like the Necropolis Town because of that, especially that ending bit. I remember you saying I really like the ending bit of this. So what was it that about Necropolis Town then that really kind of won out over, apart from Stronghold, because that's, like I said, way down the list, but over these other tracks? Was it because it was harrowing and that last sort of 20 to 30 seconds of the track?
I think some of the instrumentation that was used, it's the violins were absolutely incredible in that piece. And I seem to be a sucker for violins. Something I learned in this journey of creating this top 100 is I really like violins.
Yeah.
And it's kind of part of an X factor for me. Like if you have violins, it kind of normally just naturally gets bumped up the list because I just really like them. It just resonates. And yeah, it's so well done in this track. And I think there was a little bit of a melody right at the end. It's too short. It's far too short. It was like 15 seconds, maybe 20 seconds long. Could have easily been like another minute and a half to that track, and that would have bumped it way up the list, I think, if it had done that. But that pit is it's kind of like a progressive track, and progressive is again something I really tend to warm myself towards. And the fact that the payoff was like gold. Absolute gold. And I think that's what kind of struck it out against some of the battle themes. Some of the battle themes were good, but they're either too long or they were too repetitive and there just wasn't enough. There wasn't that something that just made it elevate or elevated. And I think that's what the Deja track had, was that elevation. And obviously the darkness as well of the track. I do, things like Ruined King. I seem to have a little thing for these sort of darker tracks.
Macabre.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, it does, like you say, Baroque, I suppose, style.
Very Baroque.
Where it's quite dark and brooding, but it just works. and the fact that it was combined with like a dark and light, and also like the type of style the game is as well. I suppose there's a little bit of nostalgia there, and the fact that it actually really suits the town that it's in.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I think it's weird because like I know obviously I know most of the music in this game. Like, it's not something that ever really. I guess I never really I never really did anything for me personally. I never really played Necropolis that much myself. Like I always think of like Haven, Stronghold, Tower, stuff like that. So it was really interesting for me to see it because I was like, oh, it's very like, you can tell it's got like a, for lack of a better term, evil vibe to it, and it definitely like hits very differently to a lot of the other music in the game. But I can see why people would say, hey, this actually stands out because it isn't light and fluffy and hopeful like Stronghold is. Stronghold is a really great piece, but it's got like a very whimsical feel to it, where this is the complete opposite, where it's just like, no, we're all dead here, Just cool.
It really suits though, doesn't it? It's like that kind of dark intro, and then it suddenly gets lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter, and then you just get hit with like the most insane melody. Inferno Towns is also very similar, but it's very evil.
Yeah.
Really good track. Highly recommend checking that one out. And Rampart Towns as well was the other one that was very close to making it on this list, alongside Tower. To be honest, just go check out all of the castle, all of the themes for
they're all...
Heroes 3, because they are insanely good. I almost surprised myself in like how few Heroes tracks was on there. But there were certain things in like other games like Heroes 2 and Heroes 4 that kind of won out because they were a little bit extra. There was just more going on.
The X factor.
Exactly.
We'll get to Heroes 4 because that really was a surprise, but I know we're going in order at the moment, but I got to ask about Dearly Beloved because this really wasn't something that I was expecting at all. Now, you said to me like you went and watched or some gameplay of the game or something. Did you listen to much music from Kingdom Hearts before hearing this, or like was it a case of you just heard it, went, no, I fucking love it? Like,
so my thing with Kingdom Hearts is one of the things that got me into creating Let's Play videos in the first place. Because I'm like, I'm never going to play this game, but I've heard it's really good. And this was many, I'm talking like 10, 12 years ago. So I opened up YouTube and found someone doing a playthrough of it. Can't remember who. But anyway, they did a playthrough, and one of the things that stuck with me was that track. I'm like, that is such a good track. And it's, like I say, the one thing that really stood out in the whole of the gameplay. Like the gameplay is great and the story is fantastic, but it really was the music that hit home. I mean, it was that track. So obviously, when I did this list, I'm like, I remember that track quite clearly how good it was. And then I listened through the whole playlist of Kingdom Hearts, all of them, and then for some reason, for me personally, that track stood head and shoulders above every other track within that game, or that CD track, I suppose. And it was that version as well, the reprise version. That just hit home a little bit more. It's like a little bit darker, I think, than the other one. The other one's a little bit more lighthearted, whereas this one was a little bit more of that sort of the darkness side of it. And I'm like, oof, that hits. It surprised me that it was on the list, in the sense that I didn't know if it was going to make the list. I remember it being a good track, and when I did it, I'm like, yeah, no, this deserves a spot, 100%, because even though it's a lot slower, and it's probably one of the slowest tracks on the thing on my list, but it just works. But I think if there was, it almost feels like it needs a little bit of a violin. If there was something else, like another couple of instruments, maybe, I think that could have been much higher on the list as well.
Yeah, I think this version plays when you get a game over, which would explain why it's so slow and dark and stuff. But it might also play on like the menus and things, because I know that during the game it's a reoccurring theme that keeps coming up and stuff. But
it is, yeah. It's like the main theme, I think, for the game for the most part.
Yeah, it's just constantly playing throughout the game in different parts. I mean, there's a few different themes that reoccur in Kingdom Hearts, but yeah, that really was, I think, to start off, it was a really interesting start to this list. Those first 3 tracks, it was like something I'd never heard, something I was, I was like, oh, chosen this over other Heroes music, and then this, which I just didn't expect. I want to jump down to like Cyberpunk, because I thought this was quite interesting, because like I remember music from Cyberpunk, but I don't really remember like much other than just like a lot of it's just 80 synth wave, you know. So, and obviously I know you like much preferred the game, so I don't know if I really got into the soundtrack nearly as much. But do these tracks play when you're driving around?
Anywhere there's a radio.
Right.
So, funny story about the Night City track. I had never heard the track in game. So, like, for like 40 or 50 hours I was playing. And then I was running past a garage and I heard part of that track. Like, it was like somewhere in the middle. I'm like, what the fuck is that track? And I ran back to the garage. Where the hell is this even playing? I couldn't even find the radio. So I was like, spent like a good minute trying to find the radio. You're like, where the hell is this? So I could stand right next to it so I could listen to it. And I was like, this track's incredible. Like, what the hell? Why is it just like a radio track? I'm like, this is insane. And I literally alt-tabbed out of the game after saving it. And I'm like, I need to find this track. And that's when I found it. And I'm like, fuck, this track is going on the list. This is going on the list. Yeah, I was just like, music that can literally make you stop what you are doing in game. Because I was on a mission. I'm like, right, I got this mission to do. I know what I'm doing. I'm running to it. And then I'm like, nah,
turn around.
Fuck the mission. I need to listen to this track. Like, what the hell? And yeah, the other one that's on there, the one that plays after Dirty Roses. So that one was I just heard that driving around. And I'm like, fuck, this is like the best music to jam to. I mean, Need for Speed has a lot of elements of that, but they're actual real tracks. They're just tracks taken from real life or like actual like pop music integrated into the game. Whereas the two Cyberpunk ones were created specifically for Cyberpunk. So although they're quite, you could literally put it in like a pop, classic, or you could put it in like a, you could play it like when you're in a nightclub, literally. And you could literally you listen to it on dubstep for the Dirty Roses one, or you could listen to it as in like a trance track for the Night City. But they were designed specifically for the game, and that's why I allowed them in there, because and to be fair, they're just absolutely wicked tracks. They're really hard to place though. Like this one, those are the two tracks that kind of bounced around throughout the track. But they ended up in that place because whilst they were really strong and powerful tracks, I found they could get a little bit repetitive. And sometimes I wouldn't want to play them straight again after listening to them. And that was one of the sort of criteria was, you know, if I play this track, would I play it again straight after? Like, how much would I invest into listening to this track? And those ones were like, kind of like blows its load kind of type of thing quite early on. It's like, right, okay, I love the track, but I probably wouldn't play them back to back. Yeah. Which is why they were quite high on the list, I suppose.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. Because I know I've heard. It's the problem is I don't remember much of the music, like because I didn't spend a lot of time driving around. So, but when I was in the car, I found a particular radio station that I liked. So it's like I feel like I heard Night City at some point in the game, but I couldn't remember. And on Dirty Roses, I was like, I could see this being in like one of the clubs or something. Like it was quite obvious that it was in the game. You know, it had that very 80s synth waves kind of vibes going.
It's like, hey, look, I'm here. You got to respect my presence.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'm gonna lump a lot of this together now. Let's talk about like the Ori and the Blind Forest and sort of Will of the Wisp, because this obviously turns up. Both games turn up a lot on this list. You start off with a Sacrifice, which is a fucking. That's I think, is that the one that plays right at the beginning? Yeah, where he's
I think that's the trailer one as well. I think that is literally like the first minute of the game or minute and a half. It's very touching, very sad, kind of tells a story, and it's like, oh, hits hard. Yeah. Again, my only gripe really with that is it's too short.
Yeah,
that could have easily been higher up the list had it been a little bit more to it. That a lot of the early Ori tracks, they all suffer from the same problem. They're just far too short. Like the vocals are insane, like the music's great, but I can't kind of say like, well, a minute and a half track is like, how can I justify putting that in like a top 20? You know, it's just can't.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's what's really interesting to me, because like when there are tracks from both these games where I'm like, you know what, I think I prefer like the Sacrifice and like Jinzo Tree, like probably the two Ori tracks that I like the most, because I think they're the ones that I like had actually done in game. So I kind of marry two and two. The other ones I did like, but I was just like, I don't know if they kind of hit the same feeling. Like the Sacrifice, I think just musically hits a fucking chord with me. Whereas a lot of like Ash and Bone and like Lost in the Storm was pretty good, to be fair, but like Ash and Bone like didn't hit that same high that I got from something like Sacrifice and Jinzo Tree being a very good descriptive track. It kind of it kind of tells a story of the area you're in and things like that. So I found the order interesting. I can obviously tell that like Sacrifice is very short compared to some of the others, but yeah, it was just an interesting set of tracks because Ori Either game basically turned up every sort of set of 10. So I was like, well, clearly like there's a lot here that you like obviously hitting hard for you. It's
yeah.
I mean, was the main factor then with a lot of these tracks early on was they were just too short?
Some of them, quite a lot of them. Some of them were progressive and then they just stopped.
Oh god, that's the worst.
That was quite painful on some of those, but also the theme was so good, so I'm like, oh, how could I not include them in the list? But they're just, they could have been so much better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Or could have been so much further down the list had they just had like a little bit more of something going on. With going back to the Ori stuff, a lot of it comes down to the instrumentation. A lot of the ones that I liked had violins, and like the Ash and Bone one was quite. Had quite a deep underlying tone.
No.
Had a violin, I believe, in there as well, and it was just that is what kind of pushed it ahead of some of the other tracks.
Yeah.
And for me, again, it violins, cellos, that pan pipes, flutes, that type of like instrumentation, it just hits something with me. Electric guitars seem to do the same thing, especially if they're like distorted or something. It's like wow, they just hit a chord, literally.
Yeah. For sure. There's so many tracks I want to ask you about, but we'll be here all fucking night, so I've got to kind of pick and choose.
Sure.
Unreal Tournament, I guess I kind of expected something from Unreal Tournament. What I didn't expect was 2004 and Unreal Tournament 3. I'm going to skip over Serenity. I think it's a great track, but Foregone Destruction, now I think this is pretty obvious through my videos. I was like, why the fuck isn't this higher? I actually really enjoy the fact that this was Unreal Tournament, the Freeze version, because I listened... so earlier, before we started recording this, I've listened to a good chunk of the original UT soundtrack today, because I was like, I need to listen to some stuff from this. Like, it turns out that game has got one of the most consistent soundtracks I've ever heard, I think. But what I think I liked about this was that bit at the end of this track that doesn't... It's about the same length as the original. It's that the original doesn't have that kind of end thing that happens on this version. Which I thought was quite cool because I think Unreal Tournament 3 does a really good job of remixing the tracks, but also adding like a sort of oomph that maybe the original, because the originals are quite not all of the tracks in the original game, but some of them are quite chill. And Foregone Destruction is probably the most chill track in the game, and I like the fact that this version adds in. Like, there's just a little bit of oomph. There's just that oomph there. I can't really explain it, but there's something there that maybe it's the modernization of it. Why? Like, any reason why was it because of that end part? Was it just you just prefer the sound of this version?
This version, I believe, is just slightly better for me. There's a lot more orchestration going on, a lot more complexity, and that's what I like. There was what I found was the original track hits harder and faster, and is more upbeat. But it tails off quite quickly. There are bits in there that it kind of goes a different direction quite quickly after the main theme. Whereas this one is consistent and it comes in and then it comes out. It comes in, comes out. Like there's an ebb and flow to that track. It's a lot more of I'd say it's more of an orchestral piece than the original. The original's quite MIDI heavy. This one is quite a little bit more instrumentation going on. There's a little bit more to it. Dare I say it's like that little bit more of an X factor. And that is why that's why that version won out. I listened to those two back to back for about 10 times over the course of like 3 weeks. So I wouldn't just be like blind to it. Yeah. I kind of like came back to it. Then another 2 weeks later, I'm like, right, now I'm going to listen to them again. Which one am I going to put in this list right now? Okay, I'm pretty sure it's the UT3. And then I go back another 2 weeks time and do it again. And I'm like, no, definitely UT3. So I definitely did my due diligence on those two tracks. And whilst I like both, the UT3 version won out every time.
It's a very
I didn't even know they remixed it. I'd actually forgotten that they did it. And it wasn't until I need to check out the UT3 playlist. Gotta be done. So that was quite early on in the research thing. Like, there's some amazing tracks in here.
Yeah.
And I actually prefer a lot of the UT3 stuff to the traditional UT. But then there's also a big there's a big number, well, a fair number of UT tracks in there as well. That do appear quite a lot that further down the list. And they're just very different tracks. They just hit.
Yeah, so I mean, I will get to this as we get down towards mission landing and stuff like that, because I think I'll bring it up then. But it's having re-listened to the entire soundtrack today, I could easily say that there are so many tracks in the original Unreal Tournament that could be somebody's favorite. Like, that's how good the soundtrack. Run, Mechanism 8, Bot Pack 9, The Course. Like, I literally listened to it earlier. I was like, the fuck, I've forgotten how good some of these tracks are. Like, normally I'm just like, oh yeah, Go Down, Razorback, you know, the Foregone Destruction, the usual three that are in my head. And like, I completely just sort of forgot like about these other tracks, and I'm like, oh my god, like making like a top 10 in that game would be fucking impossible, because every single one of those tracks would be a 1, sorry. You know, and it's crazy. I mean, obviously I really like Foregone Destruction. I think it's because it marries a very, very heavy breakbeat with the most chillest, like, do. It's like, it's a weird track, but like, I think just the combination of taking that very heavy drums and then that very, very chill, whatever instrument's playing, the synth, I think, just playing that melody over the top, and then with the strings behind it. It's like most other Unreal Tournament stuff, which is a lot more in your face. This is very, very, very chill. I was really glad to see this. So like, I really like this version as well. I think maybe I was surprised at it being at 87, because I do think this track is like fucking god tier. So, but I can understand why it is where it is, because to be honest, it doesn't there's not a lot going on in the track. It knows what it is. It stays at that kind of pace, and you get a solid track. And compared to some of the stuff later on, where I'm like, okay, I get that you like this movement and this sort of style, and I'm like, all right, I see why it is low down, as where it was. Following it up though, because I was like, oh my god, how are you going to follow this up? You then had Age of Mythology with Chocolate Outline, and I'd never heard this before, and both of the Age of Mythology tracks on this list, I don't know what it is. Like, this, it almost sounds like that they kind of made music for this game that I wouldn't even think that would be in Age of Mythology, but it's like all bass and drum. Like, the bass guitar sells it for me, and I was like, these are really fucking good. Like, what? Like, it's. I think it's maybe one of those games where I just can't imagine in my head the soundtrack being as good as it was, and then hearing those tracks, I was like, what the fuck? So, like, I mean, you've probably heard much more. You probably heard the entire soundtrack for the game. Were there? Is the soundtrack all like that, or is it kind of all over the place?
It's quite a mix.
Yeah.
Those two were definitely the two that stood out for me, by a mile. But there are other tracks in there that are good for sure. I think I had 5 tracks in my like top 200. It was in terms of like the ones that I'm like, right, these are possibly going in there. I don't know where.
Yeah.
You know, they're in the mix basically. But actually, none of the other 3 didn't quite make the cut. But those 2 definitely did. And I think it's the guitar. The guitar work on both of those tracks is sublime. It's so good. And I think one of the things that's different between Chocolate Outline and Foregone Destruction is the fact that the beat just keeps coming back, and it's a little bit longer. There's just more going on with that Chocolate Outlines track, and that's why it pushed out in the head. It was still quite tough to choose between those, but that one kind of, it kept winning out. Again, it was like 3 or 4 times like, is this one? Is this one? And I think Foregone Destruction, whilst it is an absolutely incredible track, and I'll happily play it over and over and over again in my own playlist, for me, it was like kind of like a one and done, right? That's a fantastic track. I probably won't play it for another couple of days. Whereas the Chocolate Outlines one, I'm like, yeah, no, I need to play it back. No, restart, go back, play it again. And it was just like, it was just so chill. And I really like chill music. I think that just hit a note. And yeah, it's just, it was a weird one because it's kind of like that quirkiness. And there's quite a few tracks on this list that are quirky, like a little bit different, a little bit weird, a little bit strange, but they work. And what I kept getting like God vibes from that track. it kind of feels like kind of Greeky, a little bit Egyptian-y. There's like a lot of stuff going on here, and it's like, yeah, I like this.
It actually, if I didn't have the title of the game on screen, I would have had a guess and said, even though I played the game, and said Civilization 3. It gave me that kind of that MIDI style that Civ 3 has. There's another track on this list that actually sounded like Civ 3. And I would have guessed that. I would never have known this was in Age of Mythology. Having said that, the soundtrack for like the remastered version of Age of Empires also has a soundtrack that's surprisingly great, and it just almost just doesn't fit the game, but I kind of love that. And something I was saying to you the other day was, I can tell that you like this track because there's that feeling. The way the person is playing the guitar, you can almost see the feeling on their face as they're playing it. You know, your eyes closed, like just plucking those things, notes. And I think that's something that I really noticed with that track was like, it sounds like the guy, like they're trying to. It's a sad track, I guess, because that melody's quite melancholy, even though like you've got quite a heavy bass and things. But it's that feeling going, yeah, that guy's really like enjoying what he's playing, and it's simple, but it doesn't need to be any more complicated than it is. It hits like 4 or 5 notes, and then it does it again, and then the track's moving along doing its own thing, and it's almost like chill but moving, and there's a lot. It's one of those tracks. There's a lot going on, which I think really works. Like, it's good to listen to on its own, but I could definitely enjoy that while playing an RTS. Like I'm like, yeah, this is what I want when I'm playing it. Just that kind of chillness to it, I guess. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of good tracks on Age of Mythology as well. Another one that there was a couple of tracks in there that could have made it. They didn't, but they were not far off.
Definitely a soundtrack I should probably look into, because I was just shocked by how it sounded versus what I was being told on screen. I was like, this isn't Age of Mythology. It doesn't sound like anything like it. But that's it. I just didn't know what to expect from it, and that was like one of the ones where I'm like, yes, okay, I gotta listen to that, like, because it just was such a surprise of the style. So
yeah,
that was really
it's
cool.
a very quirky soundtrack.
Oh yeah,
I really like it. And Age of Mythology, again, another thing that I remember when I played the game was the music. And it's quite easy to listen to music when you're doing RTS for the most part, because it's especially when you're doing single player, you stick it on easy and it's just like nice chilling out and vibing to the music. Like, yeah, this is good.
Yeah, definitely.
Almost makes you stop what you're doing to listen to the music as well. It's like, stop barking orders at the people, and it's like, right, just
hands off the keyboard.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, let's jump to 76, because I guess I just wasn't expecting this. Worms Armageddon, the main theme. Like, I think this is another example of something that was very quirky. Very if people know like the Worms games, so this is probably one of the more famous ones because it has an entire fucking like vocal thing over it, doesn't it? It was telling a story. Yeah, I guess I just didn't really think about this. Like, I know that you've obviously played the game, but I didn't realize you liked it as much as you liked it, like, to be on this list.
It's such a good, like, the vocals are amazing. Like, that actually makes that track, it completes it. And again, the music's kind of very dancey, very dance heavy, and I'm like, that's just great. Just makes me feel like awesome. I want to play this game. It's just a really out there track, very much like Cannon Fodder, in the sense that you just remember it, you know it, and it's like, not that it's going for an iconic thing, but it's a very iconic track. If you want an iconic, then yeah, that's one of them. The only downside with then, again, it went on too long, overstayed its welcome towards the end. I'm like, this could do with being like probably 2 minutes shorter. But in the same token, it's just it's just so much going on.
Yeah.
I love everything about that track.
That's the hard thing, isn't it? There are some tracks on this list where I'm like, they needed to be longer, and then there's some tracks where like, no, they're too long, and it's finding that sweet spot is really difficult, because like, there is a track that we will get to way down where I'm like, I literally said the video, so I could do a couple more minutes of that, and it's just one of those things in it where like, it's just like when you really vibe in with a track, that it's like, no, don't stop now, which always sucks. Just hit repeat, I guess.
You know what? That Mass Effect Andromeda really did that. It's like, if that track was maybe another minute of that melody, holy shit, that would be so far down the list, honestly. I'm telling you, that track could have easily been a top 30.
That's
But it just, I say, it was cut too short.
It's one of my biggest peeves is when tracks go la 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 la, and it's like, I don't want it to just walk off a cliff. I want it to go up the fucking mountain and then down the mountain, like,
Yeah.
And there was definitely, obviously I can see those tracks were much higher up on this list. And there were definitely tracks like that where I was like, I can see why you've put this here, but like this payoff is not worth it. I was like, it's such
the payoff's definitely worth it, but it just needs to be more of it.
Let's talk about 73, 72, and 71 because I think there's all three of these tracks are interesting to me. Time Splitter's Mexican Mission, very, 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 very much like this track. I was first off didn't expect the Time Splitters. I think we all know at this point, I would have put this significantly higher on my own personal list just because I think this track fucking, as soon as the track starts, you've got the fucking guitar run, you've got the melody, and there's no wasting time in this track. It just hits you in the face. And I'm kind of assuming it's that guitar part and the fucking trumpet playing over the top.
Oh yeah, I mean,
really...
how could you not put it there? It's such a phenomenal track. But I think my problem with this one and my gripe is there's too long between the segments. Like you have to wait a minute for the next bit. I was kind of like, I lose interest in the track waiting for the next bit. Like, I think that's the difference between Temple. Is Temple has like 3 tracks going on. You've got the hymn, you've got the music, and then you've got the guitar. And then it splits each one into like, you get the guitar, then you get the hymn, you get the music, and then you get the combined bits in like parts of the track. And that's what made that so much further down the list because I didn't have to wait so long for the payoff.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I can understand that.
So that's my only reason for it. I think if those segments were a little bit more either longer segments or like segments were not as split. Yeah, I think that could have definitely been a higher up on the list for sure. But also, I think that it's just a great track. I love it.
Yeah, I
in the same token,
I will cycle back to this when we get to Wild West, because I think it's really interesting to me about.
It's just tracks. The guitar. I think all I'm just saying is the fucking distorted guitar. That is it. It is the progressive. Like you just and play that. At the amount of times I'm playing another song. I'm not fucking. I want to play that song again. It took me by surprise. I completely forgot about the track as well.
Yeah, no, like I said,
I won't mess up your.
No. There is a reason for cycling back to Mexican Mission with that, but we'll come back to that. The AC Origin tracks, both of them to be fair, but Bayek of Siwa, I think that's how you pronounce it. I want to know what that violin is being put through because it's either the distortion pedal or because that it's so.
What a noise! Yeah. I mean, what a sound! I mean, it's just mind blowing how good Sarah Schachner makes that sound because it's like it is so unique. I think the only song that is even remotely similar in my list is Libertad from Far Cry 6. They've both got a very Anthem, Creation of Dawn. That also had a very similar same composer as well. Yeah. Sarah Schachner, but it's just the noise that comes out of that is just like the violin. You've got the underlying track. It moves. It's just
that was
so good.
That was a really pleasant surprise. It wasn't particularly what's the word? It wasn't trying to be like super loud per se. Like it knew what it was trying to do. Obviously the loud part was the weird violin thing, which knowing that this is clearly a theme of that character, I was like, this is a good theme. Like I really like the fact that this is
isn't it?
But like it's very mysterious, which I think is probably what it was going for. To me it gave me like very mysterious vibes, and I think knowing that Assassin's Creed's actually all kind of done in like memories normally, it's all done in like a fucking Animus. Like it gave me that kind of like creepiness, but also like kind of cool. It was something I just didn't expect, and when I heard it, I was like, okay, yeah, like that violin really sells that track because whatever effect they're putting on it makes it sound like loud and I mean, it might just be distortion, but I'm not
whatever it is. I have no idea. I genuinely have no idea what kind of effect is going on, but. My God, is it like just gold? It is pure gold. Yeah. And it really suits the locale as well. It kind of feels like pyramidy, Egyptian-y. Yeah. Like it's got that feel to it. And you feel like you're there.
Yeah, it's a really
powerful track.
Very interesting piece of music. Very, very much like. I feel like it's simple, but there's also a lot going on. Like it's something I just wasn't. If you take that violin like out of it, or you take that distortion or whatever that.
Complete different track. Yeah, no, it's nothing. It's just a normal generic track. But that that whole thing is just made up with that instrument, and it's nuts. It's actually nuts. Like, incredible.
Yeah, it was
hard to put into a spot as well. It's just like, man, that effect, like it could go anywhere. It's so good. Like, it literally could be a top 20, and it's so good, that kind of like finesse. But it's
yeah, no, it was definitely a nice surprise. Like, it was one of those ones where I was like, actually, this is actually quite interesting, and I quite like that when I hear something that's just a little bit different. Where it's like, oh, they've
quirky.
Yeah, and to be honest, it could just be an electric violin because they exist. So, with some gain turned up on it, but I kind of curious now. Kind of might go looking for that on the internet, see if I can find out what that effect is. Obviously 71. So Borderlands 2 main theme. This I think to start with, I wasn't expecting Borderlands, and then as this started popping up, I was like, okay, now I think I know what tracks are going to appear. This main theme from Borderlands 2 was not one of those ones. I don't ever remember us talking about that theme or anything. Like, obviously we played a shitload of Borderlands 2, but is this something that just stuck with you every time we booted it up, or did you go back and listen to it and go like, oh, fucking hell yes?
It was... I think there's a lot going on with Borderlands 2, and sometimes you don't really appreciate the music on its own merits, because there's always something going on in the game. Same with Borderlands 3, actually. The main theme I didn't really appreciate until I started listening to it properly, on its own, without Claptrap talking shit in the background. Yeah, and then I like listened to them, and I'm like, oh fuck, yeah, these are really good tracks. And you know, they were relatively easy placements for me in terms of where they were. Like, there was a lot going on, and they were... I think the Borderlands 2, I'm probably slightly overstayed its welcome a little bit towards the end, but again, it was... The track's just incredible. There's just so much going on. It's just... Jasper Kidd does such a good job. I mean, throughout the whole playlist, I mean, there's elements of Jasper Kidd. I mean, even in, like, the Valhalla, does some really good tracks there. Some great stuff. I actually listened to Valhalla. There's some tracks on them like, these are really good.
Yeah.
Like, they could have very easily ended up on this list.
Yeah, I did skip over the one Kingdom of Wessex. I think that was actually really good as well. Makes me wonder, have you actually heard like the Firestone theme from Borderlands 1 and 2?
I listened to every single track. I don't remember it. I don't recall it.
Fair enough.
But I would have listened to it, yes, but it didn't make the list.
Fair enough. Because like, for me, that's always the thing that I think about, because for me personally, it sums up a very good like loneliness feel, which I think Borderlands 1 does a much, and you haven't played Borderlands 1, but like the actual tune itself sums up the Wastelands really well in my head, because it's like, it's lonely, it's fucking, there's nothing there. And I think the main theme of Borderlands 2 kind of does that as well. It kind of gives that kind of like slight, there's not really a lot here on this planet other than people trying to kill you kind of vibes, and they kind of, I like a lot of the music in all of the games that kind of do that. I'm going to jump forward a few and go to Baldur's Gate 3, Harpy Suite. This was a little bit frustrating for me. I really like this track, but I think it was the second sort of part of it, where it goes into more of like the tavern like version of what it sounds like, ended far too soon. But I like what the track was doing. Now, I haven't played any of this. I know you played the early access build.
Yeah, I barely played it.
Oh, fair enough. But did you? I mean,
this song doesn't come up in the bit that I played. Anyway, that's for sure.
Did you just go and listen to the soundtrack? Were you just into it because of like Divinity and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. I mean, Borislav Slobod does such a good track with Divinity Original Sin 2, and when he started uploading music of like Baldur's Gate 3, I'm like, fucking sign me up. I'm obviously going to listen to this. I'm like subscribed to the guy. I'm like, yep. Sign me up. Give me all the goods. All the goods. And this track really stuck with me. And to be honest, I found that extra bit, like, it almost, like, the track ended, and then it came back with, like, an extra, like, flurry, which was absolutely incredible. A bit like you, I'm like, yeah, that could have been done with being longer. But I almost feel like it was a bonus anyway. Like, it kind of feels a little bit out of place on the track.
Yeah.
Because it already ends. I'm like, oh, that's it. I still like that track. It's still going there anyway, regardless. And then I'm just, like, hit with this little bonus, like, an extra 40 seconds of, like, really lovely track. I'm like, okay, cool. Fantastic. I'm sure there'll be more to it. That might be its own track in its own right.
I think
in the future. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, that for me, that was just a bonus. I didn't expect that to be there at the end, and it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, the track would have gone there anyway, regardless of whether that was in that bit at all. But Yeah, I was just like, oh, cool, like an extra little bit.
I definitely think they're doing that pub trick they did with Divinity 2, where they would have some songs in the pub as pub versions versus some that you'd find out in the world, and I think that's.
I'm really curious. I really, really, really hope they do what they did with Divinity Original Sin. Divinity Original Sin 2, in that they have lots of instruments to choose from. 4 would be perfect. I mean, happy with 4. If they do more, even better. But Divinity Original Sin 2, there's lots of tracks that have variations. So when you like pick your character, you kind of choose an instrument, and that's kind of like the underlying tone. So you can have like a cello, a violin, you can have an oud or like a banjo type thing. I can't remember what the other one was.
Mandolin or something, yeah.
Yeah. And you get to pick from these tracks, and they kind of come in throughout pieces of the music. I'm really hoping they do it at Baldur's Gate 3, because if they do like variations as well, I'm like, sign me up.
It's probably one of the most like simplest but cleverest things, because I remember like
no other game does it. I have never ever seen that in any other game I've ever played. I didn't even know what it was. Like, you kind of choosing is like a little flurry that you get. Just you like, it's like, okay, I don't really get what you're playing at here, but sure. And then when you like playing doing something in game, and then that little piece comes in, like, oh, hello.
I really like the idea of it, because especially like with the battle music, I really like the battle music in Divinity. But the version I'm hearing isn't necessarily the version you're hearing. Like, it's the same track, it's just the main instrument's completely different, and I think that's a really
cello
clever.
every time. Cello every time.
I think I went for the oud and the other thing, because like I think dancing with Saw sounds best.
And Sarai, that's the other one.
Yeah. Both of those are fucking godlike.
Flute type thing.
Yeah, all of to be fair,
they're all good.
They're all great, you know. I mean, I gotta bring it up, Castle Jam, like, fucking, apart from me fucking it up, you know, being like, why is this on the thing twice, and then realising one was the cutscene one. I really like this track, because it's just really fucking jolly. I think it nails medieval perfectly, in the sense that when you think of like medieval music and maypoles dancing with bears, all that kind of shit, you're like, yeah, you know what, it's like a happy fair time, jesters, all that kind of shit. Obviously, like I said, you know, Strongholds comes up a lot on this. I guess you just enjoy it because I think it's probably the flute that's in this track. Like, I guess that's the selling point for you.
So much going on with this track. There's so many instruments, so many things going on. I say it's a happy-go-lucky track, very jolly. It's just, it just gets you pumped. Yeah. Just like Stronghold, for its time, has music far beyond anything else of its era, I think. When you consider how old the game is, and like the music that's in there, it's like, this almost feels like someone's gone back in time and created music for it. Like, they created music and then went back in time, like stuck it in this game. It's just nuts. Like, honestly, so incredible, the music in Stronghold. I'm just like, I can't fault it. I can't fault it. Maybe it doesn't have like the X factor on some of the other tracks that come after it, but until it does, with the other track, and it's nuts. Yeah, so good.
I just want to bring that up because I just really like Castle Jam.
It is a good track.
The actual track I want to bring up was Supernova Dream School. I had no idea that you liked this nearly as because I fucking love this
awesome
track.
It's very much like Cyberpunk and Night City, I think. Very out there, very outspoken.
That saxophone, man.
When it comes on, I mean, even I was doing it in our playthrough when we did like recently. I'm like, yeah, fuck it, turn the music up.
That's exactly what I did.
It's just so good. It's so good.
I think that track stuck with me because of like when we first played through it, I wasn't expecting, and it's to be fair, it's pre-boss fight, so you fight everything in the room. I think it was just the saxophone cuts through, and I was like, wow, they like literally made what is like this fucking absolute bop of like this dance track with this sax on it. And it's just, it almost on purpose feels so out of place, but it also fits amazingly. And like, ever since hearing it, I listen to this thing like weekly. Like, I fucking love this track. I do. I'm like, it's so good.
You do it for Digby.
Do it for Digby. I think that was kind of a shock for me. I didn't know, like, you know, we get to Sanctuary, we get to Neon Arterial, you know, stuff like that, which, again, like, I know that, I remember, you know, during the game you were saying about Sanctuary and then later on about Neon Arterial, and like, you know, that's what I was kind of expecting. I was like, yeah, I can 100% get why you've put these on here, especially like Neon Arterial as well. Like, that's a fucking
Oh,
just
it's a banger.
magic.
It is.
But yeah, I don't know. I just wasn't expecting it. So, have you? I mean, clearly you have. But like, was it a case of? I know you played it recently, with me and Toby and stuff. But was this more a case of were you just like from hearing it in the past when we played it, then you carried on listening to it outside of the game, or was it you were reminded about it when we recently replayed it?
So when we did do it for Digby the first time, I remember that bit when he's on the radio, like he does like the jam with you. And I remember like, when everything goes off and it shuts off and you just listen to that track for like a minute and a half, you're like, wow. That's when I went and looked at it like that night, I think, or possibly the morning after. And then I was like, yeah, this is a great track in my rotation.
Yeah, boom, in it goes.
Sanctuary, interestingly, I think could have been higher on the list. My issue with Sanctuary is it's way outstays its welcome. It's such a long track. And quite often I just find myself switching off, looking at my phone after like the first 3 minutes. It happens every single time I listen to it. I'm like, ugh. The next 4 minutes of this track is like, yeah. But like the first bit is like magic. So it's like, well, it can't go anywhere other than this place, but it can't go any higher because I just switch off after the first 3.5, 4 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like 7 minutes long. It's like the longest track, I think, in my entire list.
I mean, it's interesting you say that. You're saying like being higher because it's at 54. But then, would Neon Arterial's Upper City be any higher because of anything? Because like you're saying, oh no, if it was a bit shorter and like that.
I think, no, Neon's perfect.
Right.
I think it's a really well-rounded track, which is why it appears so much higher up on the list, because it's just...
So it's only 2 places higher.
It doesn't outstay its welcome. Yeah, but it still
Yeah,
doesn't outstay its welcome. It's got a great soundtrack, and I love it. I love the whole of the track. I don't just love part of the track.
Yeah. Actually, interesting enough, sandwiched between Sanctuary and Neon Arterial Upper City was Other Side Soul Swap, which I gotta say is a really
another track that goes on slightly too long, in my opinion.
True, but it's a fucking it's a great way to start a game. Like it's
I mean, you literally load into the game and you literally punched in the face with this track. I literally I didn't even hit the new game menu for like 5 minutes. I was jamming to this track. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, and it's really
what a way to start.
Yeah, I mean it suits the game.
Unfortunately, there's no other track like it in the entirety of that. I was like, when I heard that track, I'm like, my god, this is the start of my journey with this game. I'm like, right, where's the download playlist button? I'm like, right, where is this soundtrack? I'm having it.
Yeah.
Actually, the other tracks on there even come close. It's just, unfortunately, it's a little bit of a one-hit wonder with Other Side. But my god, is it a good track?
Yeah. Let's jump forward quite a bit here because there's a lot of stuff. The 60 to 51 has some I think for me was a lot of consistency, like Canon, Top Order, Time Splitters, Age of Mythology, lots of Borderlands, UT. But what I want to do is jump forward. So we had Borderlands 3, the main menu theme, the day version of it, at 45, which was I think was the highest Borderlands track. And again, that was another one that I was shocked to see. Because again, we'd never really spoken about it. Like I knew about Neon Arterial, I knew about Sanctuary, and so to see this higher up, I was like, wow! Like when did you start liking this track? Like because I like this track a lot, but I don't think it suits I think it's the most un-Borderlands track in the entire game. But I really like the kind of like the. I can't really explain it, but the lot of it sounds like it's coming from the background to the foreground a lot in this track. Like there's a lot of like moving parts that come forward. So yeah, what was the kind of. And you said you started listening to it about Claptrap being a twat in the background, but what was it once you sort of sat down and listened and went, oh fuck, actually this is a pretty good track?
Yeah, it was a while ago. I listened to obviously Borderlands, one of the first games soundtrack is obviously going to be have some kind of presence on my list. I was pretty sure with Sanctuary, so I'm like, I'm going to listen to all the tracks again. That one was like, yeah, it really resonated. I'm like, yeah, it's a good track. I kept going back to it over and over again. Whereas Sanctuary, I'm like, do I really want to listen to the 3 minutes for the rest of the 4? Like, more often than not, when I got to Sanctuary, I'd skip the last 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Almost every single time I played that track. Whereas this one, I'm like, every single time, I'm like, no, full track, whole lot.
Yeah.
I'm like, finish it. I'm like, no, I'll play that again. It's really good.
Nice.
It's just such a beautiful track, and I just keep wanting to listen to more of it.
Yeah.
Which is what a really good track does. It's like, sometimes they do it because they're too short. When you go, oh, I can't play that again, just get that same kick. But actually, sometimes they play it and it's like perfect. I can't fault that track at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love it. So, like, it was just interesting to me seeing about it. Now, obviously, you know, I can get it. Like, you know, the Sanctuary's too long. Makes sense. You want something that's just a bit, just consistent from start to finish.
Yeah, 100%.
Followed up by what I think is a really another one of those interesting tracks, which was Tainted Grail. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the fucking name because I can't get it right.
Life and Powder, I believe.
Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. I think this does a really good job of trying to create a fucking you're going mad kind of feeling, which is, you know, which I really like, because this was very different to like anything else on the list. This had a drone pretty much the entire track, and that was kind of what was driving it, and then little bits would come in and out and stuff. And yeah, is this just something that just plays like in an area, or is this like a theme?
Oh, this track is like the theme of the game. So it's a card game, kind of like it's a weird game. It's basically like Diablo, very Diablo. Like you come in, it's very Tristram.
Yeah.
In the way that it feels, like the darkness, the gothic style of the game, and you walk around and then you go into like combat, and then the combat becomes like a card game, like a turn-based card game thing. Very clever game, very clever. And this track just keeps coming on, and like it will disappear for like 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and like you forget about it, and then you start to hear it getting building. Oh my god, this track! So fucking good.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm not even gonna play. I'm just gonna chill. And like and then you don't hear it for like half an hour, then it comes back and like oh
yeah.
This track's insane. And there's another track that's amazing as well. It didn't go on the list because it's very it's actually an actual track for the. They all are, to be fair. They're created by donHaize. So a bit like Soulstorm, really, and Soulswap. I think it's very much a. Well, the difference being, I don't think this track was created for the game, but it had to go in the list because it was so fucking good. I don't care what anyone says. This track's going on the list because it is so goddamn good. Yeah. And it just suits the game. It's very dark, very Viking, very gothic. And it's like, it just keeps coming back. It's just that recurring theme. And it hits you every time, right in the face.
I think it's really interesting that you probably put two of what I would say some of the most unique tracks. It was with that one and then Black Moon Chronicles, which I was just like fucking blown away. That chanting just sells that track. And I was like, this is so... I don't know, just right up my street, I guess. Like, it was, like, not...
They were hard to place.
Yeah, like...
It took a while for me to find their little spot, but... Yeah, that... Again, I think it maybe outstays its welcome a little bit, that Black Moon's track.
Oh, it's quite long. It's quite long.
Very long. But that track is nuts. It's just... The music itself is incredible. There's another track from Black Moon Chronicles called Wismahill.
Yeah.
Now that very nearly made it on this list, but my problem with that is very, very, very long. I think it's like 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And there's lots of bits in there that I'm like, I don't like this bit, but the payoff is so worth it. That could have been a top 100 as well, to be fair. That was very close. Not sure. I don't think I could take anything else out though for it, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the hard part, isn't it? Like, what can I put?
I'll tell you what. Black Moon Chronicles, really weird soundtrack. Very weird.
Yeah.
It's actually Le Noir was its initial launch title.
Yeah.
It's a French game. Le Noir being Black Moon.
Yeah.
In French. And yeah, it's such a strange soundtrack, but highly recommend listening to it. Really, yeah, it's just... And that track really stood out for me. Like, it was the hymn that kind of clenched the deal, but there's a really good soundtrack behind it as well. They kept coming back again and again and again. I think it comes back like 4 times. And like, woof, so good.
Yeah, no, it was that chanting really kind of solidifies why.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I think one thing I really wish that track did was, rather than have the same chant, mix the chant up. If they did that, I think that would elevate that track to a whole nother level. But because it was the same chant like 4 times, I'm like, yeah, it kind of overstays the welcome a little bit.
Yeah.
But I love it as well. So it's like, what'd you do? You have to stick it somewhere.
Find a place and leave it. I will touch on Far Cry 5. I actually prefer the other track on this list, but I will say Now That the World Is Ending was very much. It sounds like it should be playing at the end of a game. Like it's got that vibe to it. Now I can obviously tell that you really like the guitar play. I think it's a guitar or a banjo that plays on this. That clearly was the thing that I was getting. I can see why you like this because it's got this like slow kind of slide guitar with this like melody over it. Didn't do a huge amount for me, but I do think the other Far Cry 5 track you picked was like fucking like in just it was weird, but it was like the vocal harmonies on it were just like fucking insane. Like that's a great way of making me like a track. Vocal harmonies, I fucking love vocal harmonies. So when the other one came
that was the reinterpretation one, right?
Yeah, and that's because I was looking up trying
the guitar as well, the distorted guitar. There's just so much going on in that track.
And that,
interestingly, the other track didn't even come close to being on the top 100, but that reinterpretation version, fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Like it's like a out of this world type of track. Like, I did not expect it because the rest of the soundtrack there's like quite a lot of like skip. I like this bit, but skip. And then that comes on, you're like, what the fuck? Wait, what am I hearing?
Yeah.
Like, you just instantly hit with that guitar, distorted guitar, like, wow. Like, whoa. Okay, this one stays on.
Where are we going? Yeah.
This gets a download. Yeah.
Yeah, the vocal harmonies that they've got with their male and the female voices, like, they really slice through, and I was like, okay. I think I kind of would have liked that track to be longer and suddenly, like, some little bits added. But overall, I think that was not something I was expecting to hear from Far Cry at all.
No, me neither. Me neither when I was listening. It's very different to the rest of the track. But interestingly, this guy, Hammock, I think it was, he does an entire track that's like kind of like reinterpreted type of stuff.
Yeah.
But that one just leagues ahead of everything else on that list.
Yeah.
As good as all the rest of it is, don't get me wrong, like it is good. There's some really interesting tracks there, and whilst it might not be to my taste, it might be to someone else's. So again, another one worth checking out because there's a lot of soundtracks in Far Cry because they do so many DLCs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's jump to 40 because I didn't think I was expecting any of like the StarCraft 2 like kind of multiplayer music. We obviously had a couple of the tunes that play in the campaign, but then Terran 4, obviously at this point, it's that Wild Westy kind of space cowboy guitar playing, and I can clearly see why you put it here. Was a bit of a shock to me, I guess, because just we had the showdown, and I've forgotten what the other one's called that's higher up, and make complete complete sense to me. I was like, yeah, this I get this. Any reason Terran 4? Like, is there some? Is it the guitar playing and that kind of
everything?
Yeah.
I love that track so much, and the guitar, the progressive bit that's going on. Do you know what? When I'm watching GSL, I know when that track hits. Every single time it plays in GSL, I'm like, fuck, that's a good track.
Yeah.
Every single time.
I do like the fact.
And you notice it. It's the bit that it's the part. I know it's part of Heaven's Angels. Or Heaven's Devils, whatever it's called, can't remember. But that's the one. Every time, like that is the part of that entire track that really, really, really stands out. And I think it is that guitar. That guitar it's like kudos to whoever the fuck plays that because my god, it is out of this world how good that track is. Nuts. Insane.
I think that's what I was a little bit surprised about was that we got Terran music but we didn't get. I wasn't expecting Zerg, but I thought we might get something from Protoss because it's got that kind of epicness to a lot of the Protoss music.
I'll say that there's a lot of orchestral pieces in Protoss that are okay. I can definitely tolerate and listen to, but Terran music is leagues, I mean literally leagues ahead of even StarCraft 1. There's a couple of tracks that nearly made it on this list from StarCraft 1.
Yeah.
And they're all Terran. There's one Zerg track in StarCraft 1 actually that I do like.
Yeah, there's one I like in the first game as well.
But every other track is Terran dominated because unfortunately, if you're a StarCraft 2 player, and you play the races of Zerg or Protoss, I really hope you mute the game sounds, the music, and then play Terran above because you don't know what you're missing, my friends. It's so good. It's so good.
That's interesting hearing you say that, because I've always been like, I've always said Terran in both like first one and second game had the best music.
So much better.
Yeah, it's that space cowboy sort of thing that's going on with it, because it's it sums up that idea of humans colonizing another planet, and you get a lot of that like even in the campaign when you have like Jim Raynor get that bow 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 bow, like kind of like cowboy kind of Wild West thing going on, which I think works really fucking well. And I mean I like all of the Terran music like that plays in the multiplayer. Like there's one that's so like not as great, but pretty much all those different parts that make Heaven's Devils, all the individual tracks, because they're actually longer in the multiplayer than they are in Heaven's Devils. All of them. I fucking love all of them. Like I can easily go now and stick like the multiplayer soundtrack on and just be like, oh yeah, like it is. I can't disagree. I think it is head and shoulders above the other music in the game.
Yeah,
it's just got so much more of a personality to it, whereas the Protoss stuff has a personality, but it's just very epic and grand, and it's not anything. Nothing necessarily stands out. There's one track that I think I'm always like, yeah, that's really good. Zerg's just like meh. Like I don't really enjoy a lot of the Zerg music. But
Zerg is kind of like uneasy music.
Yeah,
what I would call very uneasy. But don't get me wrong, the music suits the races very well. Protoss is very technology heavy, and you can very much feel that in the music.
Yeah.
But Terran is out of this world, and I think the difference between you mentioned like Terranfall, why is this like not higher up the list? I think the one difference between that track and a lot of the tracks that came after it is the feels. Like, imagine if you had a violin added to that track, or a cello, or something that just hit on the undertone.
Yeah.
But then, in the same token, like, I almost wouldn't change anything about that track as well, because it is almost like the perfect track for it.
Yeah, definitely.
It doesn't have an X factor for me. The X factor is the guitar, I should say.
Yeah.
Like that's why it's so far down the list. That guitar is. You take every other track before that, discard it, throw it in the bin. Compared to this, it's leagues ahead because of that guitar, and it's the number of times I replayed that track. It's insane.
I mean, it's this 40 to 31 is an interesting mix of tracks. I will get to Divinity and Ruin King. I'm kind of waiting till we get sort of top 10 to talk about that stuff. Obviously, this is where we got Assassin's Creed Origins, Ezio's Family, similar-esque track, but brings back that kind of like violin. I mean, if you like
there's a bit more going on with that track.
Yeah,
and it's a little bit more heartfelt.
Yeah, it's definitely like. It feels like there's more. It's trying to tell more of a story. Like you hear the other one earlier on, and then later on you hear this because stuff's progressed. It's like a progression of that other track.
It is.
Dark Side of Genesis, the beacons. It was really nice to see that because that da 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 da, like that kind of theme that comes up throughout the game.
Violins, man, they just fucking hit me.
Yeah.
Every single time there's a violin, it's like it's higher up the list.
It's
gotta go there.
I do need to listen to the other times it plays because I think the main.
There's three versions. I did mention this when in my reaction, but there's three versions. When you're in the ice area, that's when the beacons plays, and that's. I mean, I heard the track like it's the main theme, so you hear it at the start, but it's not as pronounced. So it almost feels a little bit more distorted in the Beacons version. And then it also plays at the end of the game where you get an alternative version, which is a little bit more darker. I love all three tracks, and all three tracks would go in that exact same position.
Yeah.
I actually played around with like cutting all three of them down and then having like whatever part it was, like part 1, part 2, and part 3.
Yeah.
But I'm like, nah, I won't mess around. I'll just do Beacons because that was my that edged out slightly. Because I think the loop happens 3 times, and the other ones it happens twice.
Yeah,
and I think there's a little bit more going on with that one. It's a little bit more distorted.
Yeah, it's a really it's kind of like I don't know, it plays on the main menu, but it's kind of like the game's theme. It does pop up multiple times, and I actually really like the end credits version because I think it's like when the end credits.
It's good. Oh yeah,
and it just hits.
I think that violin is probably my favorite bit. But again, when you look at the whole track, all three of them, that one wins out because it's of the complete track.
Yeah. And
there's a little bit more to it. I think the alternate version is quite short, I think.
Yeah.
Or it only plays the thing once or twice. I can't remember it exactly off the top of my head, but yeah. Interestingly, Gareth Coker, I had no idea Gareth Coker did this track. And when I was doing the composer, I'm like, for fuck's sake, of course it is. Explains a lot.
Yeah.
It's just, by chance, it happened to be Gareth Coker, who apparently is my favourite composer. Apparently, yeah.
I'll bring it up now. I mean, obviously, there's a massive difference, but where Heroes 3 Stronghold Town was. I know you like this track. Like, I'm gonna give you some floor time to just tell people why you like this track.
I mean, it's one of the best orchestral pieces of music ever made, in my opinion. It is so good, so good. There's so much going on with that track, and it's simple. It's both simple, but there's a lot going on. And I think it's just the theme. It sounds so good. It's just eargasm for me.
Yeah. I knew it was going to appear at some point.
There's nothing about that track I don't like, other than I think it's a little bit too short and maybe ends a little bit too abruptly. My only gripes. And they're not necessarily the worst gripes in the world.
No, exactly. All right, let's talk about...
You get a good 2.5 minutes of pleasure.
I mean, it is just a really whimsical track. Like, I always say this, I don't think it suits the monsters that you get from the place, but I think it suits the, like, you go into the town, it's like, oh my god, this is so... just a beautiful piece of music.
Nice, 100%. Like my favorite. I don't know if race is the right word. My favorite team in that game is Castle, but my favorite music is from Stronghold, which kind of puts me in a dilemma. And every single time I capture a Stronghold city, I just chill for a minute.
But it's great.
Every single time. It's like it's the most iconic piece of music in my opinion on that game.
It's a really good one.
It's so good.
All right, let's talk about 30 to 21. This was this is my biggest shock in this list, but I want to start with Mission Landing because I was at the time of watching it, I was like, I'm not sure why this would be above X, Y, and Z from Unreal Tournament, and that was just a personal thing because like in my head I'm like, having listened to the soundtrack since then, I'm like, like Run, Course, all these other tracks that aren't on here. And at this point, I didn't know Hyper Blast Redux was on this list because I was like, oh yeah, Go Down's like my favorite track. I find it really fascinating that you have this as high as you have. Now, I have since gone and listened to it on my own a few times to try and figure it out. I do generally think this track is great. Like, I want to make that very clear. Like, I think this track is great, and I think it's got a lot going on. But I'm just like, I think there's other tracks in Unreal Tournament that do more. So I'm like, what is it about? I know you said the end part of this track really, that payoff for you.
Oh, that payoff is insane. But this track is a little bit longer than normal. I think it's like 4 minutes. Which normally is like, that's too long. This track, no, it's not. There's 3 tracks split into one here. You've got the intro, then you've got the main theme, and then you've got the ending. All of those keep me engaged throughout the entire video, or the entire music. It's insane just how much I love this track, and I keep playing it. And that payoff at the end, that MIDI tune is fucking nuts. It just lasts and lasts and lasts. It's just a very epic orchestral piece, followed by an absolutely epic ending. I'm like, wow.
So this is
the only thing that's different between that and the other one is the guitar.
Yeah.
The guitar on the one that follows up ending.
Yeah.
Fuck me. Wow. Just wow. Like the amount of times I'm like, it's just like, oh mate. So good.
So the thing about Mission Landing, and this is kind of like the opposite of what I would normally say with UT music, Mission Landing to me sounds like it was actually written for an orchestra or for those kind of instruments, whereas a lot of the other music sounds like it's like drum and bass or like dance and trance, right? And I was like, I wonder what this would sound like played by an actual orchestra now, because I don't know whether this track ever got remixes or whatever, and it's something that I want to look into, because I think, like, for me, I think this track ends really well, but I think it's just got a little bit of a slow start, and I think that was the thing with a lot of versus a lot of the other UT songs. A lot of them do kind of just hit straight away. Mission Landing builds and builds and builds and builds, and it does get to that point where it's like, okay, you got, it's for me like I kind of match it with that level in my head. I can't hear this track without seeing that assault level because it's so ingrained in me that like you're running
really
on the fucking
iconic
beach,
though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane. Like, even for me, I remember that track over the level.
Yeah.
But I remember the level because of the track.
Yeah.
All the time.
So yeah, it's really interesting like listening to other tracks because I was like, what? Like for me, I was like, why have you put this over some of the others? And I was like, all right, I get. Like now I know why. But it was just like, man, this doesn't. It's in a lot of ways it's very similar but also very different. It's not written the same way as some of the other tracks, but I think that's Unreal Tournament's soundtrack in a nutshell. Is that there are 10 songs that are all very like dancey, and then there's all these outliers that are very different, like Razorback and Fire Breath and stuff like that. That are just like fucking heavy rock tunes. It's a bizarre soundtrack.
It's a very diverse soundtrack. I like all. To be clear, I like all of the music on UT. Even Phobos Moon actually, which sometimes it can be graining, but my god, it's still a good track.
Yeah, I mean, ending I didn't expect, but a really, really great. Like, it's to me that one's a little bit short, but I guess because it's
way too short.
Yeah,
but it's like the whole track. It's like I can't fault any part of that track at all. There is no part of that track I'm like, don't like that bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I liked it anyway. I think
an incredible piece of like guitar work as well. Like, wow. Like it almost feels like it's too heavy, but it's really not.
It does what I mean. It plays when you win all the trophies and beat Zan, and you are in the Hall of Champions. Boom, there you go. I actually want to touch on a lot of these tracks in this one because Far Cry 6 Libertad I think is just got that loud sound to it, and I think they do a really good job of just nailing like that gets louder as it goes along kind of thing. Really, really nice piece of music. That's not nice is the wrong word. It's like I suppose beautiful, but like it just hits a lot of the right notes.
Has an incredible melody, really good melody, and the distorted guitar again is just breathtaking, X Factor-esque. Really makes you like stop and think. Like, oof. Like literally that theme, that distorted guitar bit. Every time you capture an outpost, it comes in like it kind of comes in, and you're like, "Fuck me!" Every single time it gets me, I'm like,
"Yeah,
man."
It's got a lot.
I need it. Yeah.
It carries that weight. You can tell it's got that weight behind it. Which is really cool about it. Civ 4 Baba Yetu. I mean, like, again, one of those tracks. I was like, yeah, you're probably gonna put this on here. I mean, it's an actual song that was written for the game and stuff, but it's so fucking happy, which is like, I think that again one of those tracks. It just fucking builds, and then you get the payoff at the end. It goes bang, and it's like this massive, sung in African vocals. I believe it's African, and just a fucking what a way to start a game. Like what a great track.
I'd forgotten that track even existed because the Civ when I played Civ 4 was like ages ago, and then me and you were like, oh, let's jump into Civ 4 after doing like Civ 5, I think it was, or Civ 6.
Yeah.
Well, I just jump into Civ 4, and then like you get graced with that track. And I'm like, what is this? What the fuck is this? It's actually nuts. Like, you literally stop. I'm like, I don't care. We're not playing for at least 5 minutes. I'm listening to this track and finding out what the hell it is.
Did you know?
So good.
Did you know that when you install the expansions, it changes the main menu theme?
I did not know that.
So, if you install Beyond the Sword or the other one, I forgot what it is.
Oh, yes, no, yes, you're right.
But you can go into the options and have it set to the one you want. So you can have
nice.
Beyond the Sword, but have Baba Yetu play from Civ 4.
Fair. It's interesting that the two expansions, they do not hit in any way the same way that the original does. I was like, oh, it's more music to check out, and it just was not the same. But that track is insane, and it's actually I don't know if it still is, but it at a time it was the only like soundtrack to have won a Grammy.
It might
Christopher Tin even.
Yeah, it might still be. I can't remember, but yeah, it's that's how you start your game. And to be fair, like Civ, not so much Civ. Well, Civ 5 kind of does it, but Civ 6 is, I guess, they've kind of done the same principle where they've written a song either that was redundant or specifically. And that track they do in a very different style, and they just turn the volume up and try and deafen you. I don't think it's as good as Baba Yetu by any means, but it is still one of those like where they've gone like, let's get some real people singing Latin or some shit. As soon as you boot up the game, and I think it's kind of something I like about Civ.
There's Latin, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's good. It's definitely a good track. Didn't make it for me, but it's definitely one I was on my list. My expanded list, I should say.
Here's the other 100 tracks.
Yeah.
I'm just going to touch on some of these now. The next few. Elder Scrolls Online, we will get to that because number 1 was a different track, but we'll talk about both of them in there. Time Split of Future Perfect Temple, you already said that, those 3 bits of that track make it more engaging for you personally, just hit all the right notes. And then followed up with Halo Anniversary, like the main theme, the classic Halo theme, just done with like a bit more modernized. I mean, that Halo theme is basically responsible for like so much more orchestrated and so much stuff. Like that really was a pioneer of its time. And I'd never heard the Anniversary version, so I was like, because the Halo 2 has the electric guitar version of the theme, which I don't like as much. I like the fact that this is just all violins and Gregorian chanting. And this is a great example of the reason why I like when violins do that. Like they're kind of like more like shorter notes. It's like like kind of thing going on. I mean, it's the Halo theme. it's fucking great. Like,
Without saying anything else.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say it's that good.
We did touch on Detroit Hopeful, but I do want to bring this up. This was the track with the piano and the strings, and this actual part of your reaction and the next track and the Ori track was funny because you were just like, oh my god, the emotion lying back in your chair, and I was like, oh yeah, it's all right. I did enjoy this. To be fair, I think this is like I said, I really respect it. But it was I was listening to this, and then suddenly the next track turns up, which happens to be Tropical Freeze, and yeah, man, that was I should have seen this coming because I went back through my videos online, and you were like, oh my, you left a comment about it. I did not expect this to be on here at all. I didn't know how much you'd listen to it. Obviously, now I know. And I think it was weird for me because it's like I just don't think of you ever really listening to either David Wise stuff or a lot of platformers and things like that. So, was this one of those ones where you'd heard it on my list, or was it just something that you remember hearing and then going back to?
I'm pretty sure you sent me the track a long time ago.
I did, yes.
On Discord.
Yeah.
And I listened to it, I'm like, yeah, it's a good track. And ever since it stuck with me. I actually, ironically, not long after that, ended up adding it to my playlist, which I then used to when I was driving around.
Oh, nice.
Just generally. So yeah, a little driving around track. I got a little video game playlist that I have that I play, and that was in there. And it's just a great track. I mean, it doesn't really, to me, it doesn't really matter where the track's from, or it plays in the game. For me, that track is just nuts.
Yeah,
it's insane. There's nothing I don't like about it. Maybe plays a little bit too long. I reckon maybe cut it down a minute, and I'll be like, sweet spot. But I'm happy with the extra minute. I mean, just more of the same. I mean, the only difference between that and some of the later tracks, for me, I think some of the feels, like some of the violins, maybe if you had like another instrument perhaps, just to give that, or a cello or something a little bit darker to add to it, or maybe mix the theme up a little bit so it's not like just a little bit too repetitive. But these are like, in terms of gripes, these are so minute because the track's insane. Like, you could just say, yeah, have that track exactly as it is, and I wouldn't complain at all.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to elevate it or create a second track that was maybe slightly different, I think there could be a spot for it further up the list or down the list.
Yeah, I mean, like, I was genuinely shocked. I mean, I shut up because I was basically like bawling my eyes out inside. I was like literally holding back tears at the time because I was like, oh my god, I just didn't expect it. It hit me way harder because I mean, I've listened to this track a lot of times. I love the Tropical Freeze soundtrack from start to finish. I'm like, it's probably one of it's in the top 10 of all like just soundtracks. But like, I think there's something about that track where it's like, again, the feels in the guitar playing, and then right at the end have these little things that come in, and I'm just like, oh, fucking Christ. And like, you see that in the video, I just sit there because yeah, it just hits. But do you know what? Do you know what the funny thing is? It's not even my favorite track from the game. I think it's easily the best track. But I think now, having listened to Scorch and Torch, which is also from this game, I think that track uses violins and the drums, and it hits in a very different way. And I think that is slowly becoming my favorite track of all time, because I can't explain why. It's just there's something about it being so percussive, and
it's like an X factor. It's something you can't really explain,
yeah.
but you just know it's there. It's subtle, or it's in your face, or whatever reason. But sometimes you just have an X factor.
Yeah, I want to bring up climbing the Jinzo tree, because like at the time, like I was very emotional after hearing Seashore War, so I was like, this didn't do any. Like, I know this track, like I like this track. It definitely did not hit me. I think it should have hit me at the time. I do think this is a really, really nice piece of music. I think it moves along nicely, where you said in the video, where the melody comes in, goes off, comes back in later on, and the tracks, you know, the part where you're climbing the trees.
It's a diverse track.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think that's what edged it out. Like, both tunes are insane. Like, let that be known. Like, they are both incredible tunes in their own right. But there's this one, like, I think that they're pretty similar. They're both long tracks. But what this one does is has an ebb and flow to it that I think the other Seashore War doesn't quite have.
Yeah.
It's very, like, it's the same track times 3 type of thing. Like, it keeps playing the same theme. And the theme's insane. Like, it really is good, which is why it's so far down on this. However, the difference between that and Jinso Tree is the Jinso Tree is, like, very similar to some of the other tracks I mentioned, where they're like 3 or 4 tracks split into one.
Yeah.
You've got vocals going on. It's like every single Ori track up to that point in the list combined into like one fucking mammoth of a epic track.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so, for me, it hits. You've got the violins, you've got the underlying deep tones, you've got the vocals, you've got a beat behind it, like a da 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 da, a progressive thing going on. It's like, fuck me, like, how can you not, like, oh, it's for me, I'm like, there is no way in hell I could ever put Seashore War above Jinso Tree, because there's just so much going on. Orchestrally, it's fantastic. There's nothing in that track I don't like. Every single time I play it, I'm like, play it again. Whereas Seashore War, because it's like the same theme, there's times where I'll be like, I love that track, but I wouldn't play it back to back. Whereas Jinso Tree, because there's just so much going on, I'm like, no, I want to. What was that bit again that happened in the middle? I'm like, yeah.
I tell you what, I kind of wish that in that case that you'd swapped climbing the Jinzo and then Hyperblast Redux, just because I think at the time, like I said, it was just that emotional shock. I was like, you know what, how do you follow up something as good as this? And it didn't really land. But, like, I can't deny that it is a very good piece of music. And like you said, you hit the vocals in it and the progression of that track. Personally, I still wouldn't have put it above that, but that's just because, like, I'm massively biased towards David Wise.
I think it's personal taste as well. Like, certain people will like certain things more than others. For me, there's just a lot going on in that track. It's got everything I like about a track combined. Really. I mean, I love vocals, I love violins, I love progression, all of that stuff. Yeah. And you put it all together and it's just like, well, this is complete. Like, this is the best track. One off.
Well, that's it. I mean, at this point, it's like everything
is like beyond God tier at this point. Yeah. In the thing, it's like.
Speaking of which, Hyperblast Redux. Like, I did not remember this. Like, and actually, after hearing this and listening to all 4 versions of Go Down, really, this is like the black sheep of the family, because this UT 2004 soundtrack is nothing like the other Emerald tournaments. They've gone for a very different style, and I've definitely got some thoughts on it, but I know why you picked it, because this track sounds epic as fuck. Like, it is legit. Like, you listen to it and you're like, man, they went hard. They went harder than they needed to. Which is why I'm assuming, like,
there's a lot going on in the track, and there's multiple different themes going on in this track. There's like multiple things that come in and out constantly, but it's also really hard hitting. It's fast paced. It's like actiony. And I think that's the difference between that and Jinso Tree, is it's a little bit more actiony, but it does it in a way that's not overpowering. it's very orchestrally sound. Like it's a very beautiful piece. But in the same token, there's also a lot of like it hits harder.
Yeah.
In certain parts, and it just keeps going. You know, they keep mixing it up, keep changing the formula a little bit. You know, tweaking it here and tweaking it there, putting one instrument in, one instrument out, and like in the end, you know, like the end bit is like combine everything, and it's like wow, just wow.
Yeah, it's there is a part of it which I didn't like. I didn't realize until I listened to it today, where the I think it's the end melody. You actually change some of the notes. It doesn't play the same, and I was like, ooh, I don't think I like that. Like it doesn't. Like I know what the melody should be from the original and stuff like that, and they kind of try to mix it up a bit, and I was like, I don't know if it works. Like I feel like it's just it's the change of timing. It's like either an extra note in there, or like they've taken a note away, and I'm like, why have you done that? Don't do that. But like, it is very different because it doesn't start the same way. Like it kind of fades in and out the bop 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 bop, but it's very much layered differently. And then again with the trumpets that do the wah 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 thing, it's completely different timing to the original, and like it's almost like, to me, I was like, this would be fucking amazing.
Working?
Well, no, I would love to see it played by an orchestra live.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, you know what? I
Amazing.
think seeing that live would be fucking awesome. But
yeah.
it was just like listening to the other versions. I was like, okay, this is literally the black sheep of the go downs or Hyperblast Redux, because it doesn't stick to what the track is. It's like, hey, we got the track, but we kind of wanted to do these other things with it, which I think
It's like they had fun with it.
Yeah,
Took the track. It's like, let's just have a little bit of fun and see what we can create. And I mean, that is what you create. Sign me up. Give me more.
But like the rest of UT 2004 soundtrack is so like, I don't know. Not all of it sticks out like the other games. It's not a bad soundtrack by any means. There are some really good songs in there, but it's nothing like. I mean, UT3 borrows a lot from the original game and then kind of amps it all up, and then 2017 kind of like modernizes stuff as well. So it is weird hearing a lot of the 2004. I think it's very different composers. I mean, I just think they were trying to get away.
I think he did. I think Kevin.
Yeah.
He does U 2004. I think there's multiple people on UT 2004 if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
But he does that particular track, and
yeah. It's it's almost one of those things where I was like, I kind of want to see a modern rendition done with an orchestra, like now done with an orchestra with that version, because I think like 100-piece orchestra playing that would like be fucking insane. But yeah, just a really different, like not completely different, but a different take on that track. And again, it shocked me because I was like, Go Down basically is my favorite UT track because of Deck 16. Again, ingrained in my head, and I'm like, yeah, I love that piece of music. I've like listened to like remixes of it. I've listened to that track so much. To then hear this, I was like, oh, I'm shocked to see that you put this above everything else, even if it is the UT 2004 version. I didn't think that this would be above all those other ones. Like that was quite surprising. Actually.
So, interestingly, all the other Hyperblasts wouldn't have made it into the list. This is the only one that did.
Oh, spicy takes.
Yeah,
that's really interesting to me because, like, I mean, I can't remember where I put Go Down on my list. It was probably in my top 10.
Go Down wasn't on my list at all.
Yeah.
Until this one came up, I'm like, fuck, this is insane. And it same with Hyperblast and UT. It merged Go Down and Hyperblast because Hyperblast still has that kind of recurring theme from Go Down, where they kind of changed the formula. And both of those tracks are great. Don't get me wrong, they're absolutely phenomenal pieces. But neither of them made it into my top 100. Only this one did because of the way that it merges them and kind of has a very, like I say, the Black Sheep of the Family is a very different take. And because of that, it was like, wow.
Yeah, see, I would have been
the wow factor for me.
It's really interesting because now, even though I like the original, I would probably pick the UT3 version. Because listening to it the other day, I was like, fucking hell, they went hard on this as well. But that has that authentic, like they've taken the original and just amped it up by like 100%. But it is interesting though. Like I said, this is something that I would love to see play live. Like I really, really would love to see this play live because I think it's incredibly epic. It actually could be used for like other things, like I could see it on like adverts and other shit like that. Like I was like, this version of it has that kind of it's different in so many different ways. Where I'm like, yeah, I could see this being used, game trailers, things like that. Like I was like, yeah, I could see that, and I think that would really draw people in. Divinity, like I said, we'll get to. There's a ton of Divinity stuff on here, and the Original Sin 2, I should state. Skyrim Dragonborn, I makes sense. I know this track. I don't know any other music from Skyrim. Very bombastic.
Orchestral piece.
Yeah, very much in your face. Doesn't waste too much time either. It's just like da 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 da. Sounds like Pirates of the Caribbean, kind of.
Yeah. So interestingly, that Baldur's Gate 3 theme that follows it is very. It definitely takes elements of Skyrim.
Yeah.
And what makes Skyrim great, and then that's like part 1 of the track, and then they follow it up with part 2 of the track, which is an entirely different, like literally an entirely different track almost. But you combine the two, and my god, it's gold. It's so good, and like the vocals and everything that's going on in that track. I mean, let me tell you, when I first loaded up Baldur's Gate 3, and that thing hits you in the face like a fucking truck. You don't go new game. You wait and you listen and you just fucking chill.
You wait there for
and then you're like, wow.
And then hours
I think
pass.
when you go new game, and then I think when you go to new game, I think you're hit with the harpy theme.
Ah.
And then it's like, fuck me, man. Like, what an intro to this game.
2 hours
smashed in the face with like these insane pieces, and like, wow.
2 hours later,
right.
you finally
Yeah, this
get
game's good. yeah, I'll definitely.
I mean, so then we had after the Baldur's Gate one as well. We then had Divinity Original Sin, Bittersweet Regrets. I do not remember this at all, but I was like, yeah, this is got this is everything
beautiful.
you want, everything you want from a Divinity track, and that really
nuts.
good.
It's really nuts. It surprised me that it actually outranked all of the other Divinity Original Sin 2 stuff up to that point as well. I'm very well deserving of it. It's like the only track from Divinity Original Sin 2. I'm sorry, Original Sin, the original, that really stands out. But my god, does it stand out! Like, I mean, every time I listen to that track, I just, I'm playing away with the guitar. I'm going for it.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's a really nice piece of music, and I think the Divinity stuff, like, just you just don't. I don't. Is it the same composer on the first one?
No.
No.
No, so there's a guy called Kirill, I believe.
Oh, Kirill, yeah.
Who does Pavrovsky, I think it was, from memory, who does Divinity Original Sin. And then they brought in Borislav Slavov for Divinity Original Sin 2. And then they kept him on for Baldur's Gate 3.
I mean,
I'm so glad they did.
To be
I'm
fair,
really happy with that.
To be fair, Bittersweet Regrets could have been done by Slavov. To be honest, it has that same vibe to it for sure. I'm going to mention it just because it's on air, Civ 6 Scarborough Fair. Not a surprise at all from my point. I was like, yeah, he doesn't shut up about this track. Like,
Orchestral. I mean, when you have a track that is like literally taken from a folk song, it's a tall order to make something that's better than the original. Because obviously you've got the vocals. Not everyone. A lot of people will know or recognize the song, the actual vocals. The fact that this song has no vocals, and yet every single time, without fail, I sing along to it. I know all the words. It makes you. It demands your respect and it demands your attention. When that song comes on, doesn't matter where you are. You could be playing Mongolia, you could be playing Japan, you could be playing in, France. When that track comes on, you fucking know it's on.
yeah.
Because it's like, oh my fucking god. Like, it's so good. And all 3 versions, like, just to point out as well, so with Civilization 6, every track has, I believe, 3 versions. Either 3 or 4, I think it's 3. You get the ancient era, you get the medieval era, and then you get the industrial era. Every time they change up the formula. So the ancient era is like a lot of the older instruments creating the same theme. And then the medieval era, you got some of the mandolins and some of those sort of more medieval type of instruments. And the industrial era is very, very industrial, like the sort of orchestral version of it, shall we say. Now, not every sometimes they become more grandiose, sometimes they become more epic. Sometimes I prefer the older versions to the newer versions. In this one, all three versions could easily have put that on that spot, but for me, the industrial era just hits. Now, I think it's the shortest of all three, which is kind of surprising, given a lot of the time I'm like, oh, it's too short. But my God, the epicness of that track, the progression of the track, and when the payoff is, it's nuts.
I'll tell you why it works, because it's the idea of Civ as well, like, exploring the new world. When you've got this very, very grandiose like version, and in the more modern eras, it kind of works for what they're trying. Like, to me, it conveys like, you've fucking conquered the world, and you've you've got to modern time. It's got a very modern time feeling, like, and that's the point of it. It's meant to sound more modern, and I think it works really well as a modern interpretation of the track. And it also gives me, like, hearing that version, I'm like, I think Civ. I do, you could be like, here's a version of Scarborough Fair, but it has like almost like a Civ vibe to it, where it's like exploring the world and like building, modern day shit. And I think it works in that context where they're like, hey, this is meant to be a modernization of this track. And it's just you can tell, like, they always spend so much time and effort on the music in Civ. So, because a lot of the music in these games, or in that game specifically, is like old folk songs for different countries, and so this is what England gets, along with like another song. I think it's 2 per civilization, basically, and it's like, yeah, this is just. It sounds like it could be, doesn't even have to be like from Civ, but it just has that grandiose, epic kind of new world feeling vibe that I get from it.
It's nuts. I almost can't put into words just how good that track is and how amazing it makes me feel every time I listen to it. Yeah. I'll just sit there and just shut up and just let it play, and I'll stick it on repeat.
That's why you always play England, isn't it? Every time.
Oh yeah. I'll even if I play other Civs and England isn't in the game, what I sometimes do is mute the in-game music, and then just have the playlist of all 3 versions
on loop
and just randomize them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I just love that. It's just so good, so good.
Oh, all right.
Easily, in my opinion, the best Civ 6 track.
It's definitely up there for me. I really like Australia's and Russia's as well, so there's a lot of great music in that game. Let's jump to 11 and 10, because I was not expecting Heroes 4 to be on this list as much. Now, I remember playing the game, and I remember enjoying it, not as much as Heroes 3, but enjoying it. I did not remember the music going this fucking hard, and the music goes really hard in this game. I mean, I think you've always said you preferred Heroes 3 gameplay-wise, the story, stuff like that.
Civ 4 is kind of like the odd one out in the series.
Yeah.
It very much changes up the formula from like Heroes 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
But again, the one thing I always remembered about Civ 4 was the music. Civ 4, Heroes 4.
Yeah.
Every single time, like, it's when you go on Haven is that kind of very angelic, grandiose town. But even though they're on there, I mean, that was very close to being on the top 100 as well.
Yeah.
And that is very, I'd say, similar in ways to Haven, the Heroes 6 soundtrack. But when you're walking around, and these 2 tracks, Hope and Desolation, almost always play next to each other, guaranteed. They're basically one track that they just split. I kind of wish they were just one track, to be honest. I mean, that would have been great. But yeah. But yes, I think one's the grass theme and one's the dirt theme. Grass being, I think, Hope, and then Desolation when you're in the dirt.
Yeah.
And then when it comes in, my God, it's like an orchestral masterpiece. And there's a lot. It's very Irish as well, very folky, very.
Yeah, I noticed
that. I'm trying to think of a word, but yeah, it's very grandiose. There's a lot going on, very angelic. And then they hit you with the vocal. It's like it's very layered. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of weird instruments in this going on, and then you hit with the vocals as well, and it's insane just how good that track is. And like, literally, when I heard the Heroes 4 soundtrack, I was literally weeping with just like This is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that game must have come out like between 2000 and 2005. The soundtrack sounds like it's like super modern. Like the way that they've crafted the soundtrack for Heroes 4 is crazy to me. That it's from such an old game, like, you know, and that's, I think, what shocked me hearing, because I'll be honest, I don't remember any of the music from that game. Like, you know, I mean, I played it. I feel like I played it enough with you, but don't remember any of the music. So hearing this, I was like really shocked at the quality of like what was being crafted. It's almost one of those things to me where I'm like, this is too good. Like I don't remember it being that good, kind of thing. But it was really like holy shit, man! Like this is like really a lot of the stuff that you would put on this list beforehand. Like whether it was doing anything for me or not, like I feel like the Heroes 4 stuff was like really improving on a lot of those tracks and just going balls to the wall, really.
It's beautiful, but it's heavy and it's weird.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot going on. It's a lot of sound coming out, and it makes it appear heavier than it actually is.
Yeah.
But it's also chillingly beautiful. Like everything about that track there are so many instruments going on, to and froing, and it's just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Like I'll literally just close my eyes and listen to it, and almost like a tear will
tear
past my eye. It's just so good. I'm like, fucking hell, it hits so hard. And it's very Strongholdy as well. Heroes 4 and Stronghold have a lot of similarities. I don't know it. I mean, Stronghold obviously came out before Heroes, so I'm wondering if Rob King and Steve Backer and I forget the other gentleman's name, unfortunately. Steve Romero, I think it is. But anyway, all the three of them that create that track, they've created all of the Heroes stuff, by the way, from Heroes 1 all the way through. And these three guys, basically, I don't know whether they've taken inspiration from Stronghold, but there are definitely some similarities in those two, but it works. Every single time it works. It's so good. There's so many good tracks. And there's definitely some stuff on Heroes 4 that was very, very close to coming on my list. It's definitely worth checking them out. I might have even dropped the ball on one of them. I think I might have dropped the ball on the Haven one. I can't remember. I probably need to go back and listen to that one and see whether that should have been on the list.
Well,
instead of something else, but you know,
give it 5 years.
It is what it is.
Give it 5 years when you redo it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, right, we'll go through these top 10s. Obviously, we did Desolation. Emperor Battle for June, Tribute to Evil. I don't know why. I just didn't see this being on the list. I don't think I've ever... You know, to my knowledge, I knew you liked the Auto soundtrack, and I didn't really ever know that you were that into the Harkonnen stuff. Like, for me, Tribute to Evil sums up the Harkonnen perfectly. It's like everything about that track. So that was a real pleasant surprise. So, I mean, I know in more recent times you've obviously re-recorded all the campaigns and stuff. Was it, again, something more recently, or is it something that, like, you know, for a while now that you're like, yeah, I really like that track?
It's a bit like Terran and StarCraft.
Okay.
You know, there is one race or one team that has noticeably better music than all the others. And that, my friends, is Harkonnen. Yeah. Harkonnen just has... it's the guitar work. Every single track that I really like in Emperor is all really good guitar pieces. Now, what this track does is break the rule for me, because I like rock, I suppose, to a degree, but I find a lot of rock too heavy. And this track breaks the formula because it goes so hard, but it never goes too hard. That's weird. It's just a magical track for me, because it's like, this track I should hate because I really don't like stuff that's just fucking noise, you know, just too much going on. This track is just, it's a weird breaking of the rule, because the guitar piece is insane. Like, there is no other track that really comes that close outside of, I think, the Time Splitters 2 track. It has that distorted guitar. Wild West, that's the one. Yeah, I'm trying to think of it. But that guitar work is insane. Like, there's no other track outside of Wild West on this list that even comes close to that guitar work. I mean, Terran 4, you could say, is pretty close, I suppose. That is also on the same sort of level. But it hits harder, the Harkonnen one. And it demands your presence, you notice it when it comes on, and it's like, fuck, this is insane. And it gets you jammed, it gets you going, and it gets you pumped, and it's like, but it's never too hard, but it's overpowering, and it stops you doing what you want. I think so it's an insane track. I love it so much.
in my video and then in your reaction, I was like, oh my god, whoever recorded the drums, like, I was like, yeah, and you're like, no, man, it's the guitar. What makes that track is the combination of just about everything, because it starts off with this weird like wah 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 noise, and then the drums go doo, doo, and it sort of builds from there. But what makes this track really interesting is that the lead guitar, that playing the melody, it never sounds heavy because they fucking cake it in reverb. So what you do is what the track is you've got these drums that are punching, they're constantly punching through it. You've got the bound bound dow 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 playing behind it, and so when the melody comes in, it's almost like it's like out of reach. It's got that kind of like it's you're hearing it, but it's really far back. So instead of being just hit with this like full-on heavy sound, you get this almighty fucking like godlike guitar playing, and it just it's so,
it just works, doesn't it?
It's
like, I keep mentioning X factors, things that just really like, they shouldn't work, but they really do. It just has that next level ness about it, and like, it's hard to put into words just how good that is, and how impressive it is. And like, every single time I'm like, I'm going hell for leather. And my only gripe with the track, I think it's slightly too long. Again, slightly overstays welcome, a little bit too repetitive. A bit like the Seashore War one, I suppose. But, I mean, we're talking very small things here on a track that is top 10 of all time.
Yeah.
To put that out there.
Yeah.
I'm taking, like, very tiny little, like, pin pokes at this. So, I think it could have been a minute and a half shorter. It could have been a little bit less repetitive, but it doesn't matter. It's too good.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was really shocked because this is my favorite track from Emperor, but I will say that I actually like all three of the soundtracks for all three teams. This I like Harkonnen because they're my, I've always preferred playing as them. I like the fact that they have heavy rock versus Ordos that's very electronic versus Atreides, which is very grandiose. And, depending on who you are, that's going to affect which of the teams you probably like hearing the most, potentially. I definitely think Tribute to Evil is the best track. There are other Harkonnen tracks that would easily be on my own personal kind of playlist because I fucking all great. But I personally really like all three of them. But I completely understand, and I agree with you that the Harkonnen stuff is a cut above. It's very evil sounding. It very much fits, and it's just really, really, really tight music, and it's a pleasure to listen to. So yeah, that I did not expect to be in your top 10. I think that was a real pleasant surprise. I don't have a lot to say on the Star Citizen one, other than I think that was one of those tracks again that could have probably for me could have done with a bit more going on. I don't know. Was that something you just heard? Was that something that you would were like, oh, I really like this?
Yeah. So my first experience with this track was watching a trailer for the game.
All right. Yeah.
And then it came on, and I'm like, the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Absolute godlike track. It took me ages to find the damn thing, because Star Citizen isn't even out.
Yeah.
Barely had an official soundtrack at the time, and I'm like, I can't find this track anywhere. I finally found the damn thing, and I'm like, my god. It builds and 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 builds. And the payoff is 200% worth it. My god, it's like they do little bits and they bring little instruments in. They do another little bit and they bring another instrument in, and then they add a little bit. They tease the vocal, it comes in and out throughout that track 2 or 3 times, and then right at the end they turn everything up to 12, and it's fuck, holy shit! What is? It's oh man, unreal level of production on that. My only thing, I think it just needs to have another loop, one more go, or 1 or 2 more goes of it, another minute, and I think that could have been part of the list actually, to be fair. But I think it was just cut a little bit too short. But again, in the same token, in a weird kind of way, it's one of those tracks I would play again and again and again and again and again to get that same kick, and I get the same kick every time. I no matter how many times I listen to that track, I never feel like it got worse.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like every single time, I'm just like it's like wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like wow.
It's really hard to do like sci-fi sounding music. A lot of the tracks that you picked that had that kind of sci-fi feel definitely sounded it. I think I just kind of wanted a little bit more from it. Even after that build and stuff, I need to go back and listen to it like out of context of this list and stuff.
Yeah.
Again, following it's hard when I've got an emotional attachment to something like Tribute to Evil. It is kind of hard for me for something I've never heard for the first time to be like, you know, it really has to punch me in the face. And I think this is one of those tracks that's like a grower. Like I feel like if I listen to it enough times, I want to be like, right, okay, I get the get that build and stuff. But I think the first time hearing it, I was kind of like, just kind of wanted a bit more.
The thing with this track is once you start listening to it, you almost can't stop. It's like a Pringle. You just want more. Every single time I listen to that track, I want more. And that is a sign of a really good track. Like when it keeps demanding that you get played again and again and again.
Yeah, I'll bet not.
It's a bit similar to that Wild West one, actually, the next one on the list, because that is one of those tracks that every time I play it, I'm like, I just want to play it. I want to listen to that guitar again. Yeah. Every single time. And it's a progressive track again. It's a very progressive track. It just... and again, the payoff, 200% worth it. 100... It's...
It's hard for me because
It does something.
I really just... I like this track personally, but I was like, I in good conscience could never put this above. To me, Mexican Mission is very unique, where it slams together Wild West and like dance music. Wild West itself is very much more authentic in the structure of what it is trying to create, which is it's trying to be an epic Western piece of music. And I think in terms of length, it actually works really well because it has movement to it. You know, it starts off and then it has a diff change, and then a bit at the end was like kind of like very like it's almost like Dusty Sand playing, or like guitars playing that distorted bit at the end. I just don't think it quite hits the same highs as something like Mexican Mission for me, because I think Mexican Mission, like I said, Mexican Mission slaps you in the face. Like when that track comes on, it slaps you, and that guitar, that running guitar and stuff. I completely understand why you put it here. Like you already explained about the whole distorted guitar thing, really selling it for you. Like the track goes on, and then at the end you have that payoff of that like guitar. But it's so weird seeing this track and things like Return to Planet X for me. It's just like
that was one of the latecomers. So
okay.
That was one of the latecomers, and it surprised even me. And I started it by putting it further down the list, like for Mexican Mission. And every single time I played it, I'm like, fuck, I need to play that mission. I need to play that again. And every single time, and I kept putting it down the list. And then every single time, I'm like, fuck, I gotta play that song again. I'm like, how far does this have to go before like the next track is like better? And that's why it ended up so far down the list, because it's like, whereas the Mexican Mission, I say there was bits in there where it just kind of the payoff. It waits too long for like the ins and outs, the ebb and flow of it. Whereas this one, every single time, I'm like, I need to play that track again. So good, so good. And I came in at the same time as Terran 4.
Yeah.
Because I found both those tracks similar times. And I'm like, okay, both of these tracks are going on my list. I don't know where. I need to start putting them in between things, and like every single time. And I got to like Divinity, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's as far as it goes. When it goes down to the other one, I'm like, no, it's got to go further than that. Like, how the fuck? I'm like, I've never even heard this soundtrack. I don't even know the mission it's on. And every single time,
like an awful mission. I fucking hate that mission.
No, I don't even remember where it's from, but I'm like every single time, man. And I thought it was too high. Well, at first, I'm like, nah. But I come back to it like 2 weeks later, and I'm like, it's perfect. Yeah, it's exactly where it goes. I'm like, I like what I like, I guess. And the distorted guitar every single time just works.
I mean, I'm glad to see Time Splitters get quite a lot on this list, because I feel like because we haven't had
got way more than I thought it was going to.
Yeah, and like Graham Norgate is fucking. I don't know how he does it. He's very good at merging. Like you take this, you take Temple, Mexican Mission. He's very good at merging the feel of one thing with a beat, and like all of these tracks, less so with Wild West. That's more authentic, but all the other tracks, he just seems to nail like the feel of it, and I'm like, man, this guy, I don't know what he's done in recent memory, but this guy does not get enough credit because both Time Splitters 2 and Time Splitters Feature Perfect, there is so much good music on there. There's a couple of duffers, but other than that, I'm like fucking Zeppelin, Return to Planet X. There's so many good tracks there where I'm just like, go and listen to the soundtracks. It's just fucking mind-bending, like how good it is. And so yeah, to see it at 7 was really, really nice.
I was probably as shocked as you were to see it that high. Or low, I guess, whichever way you look at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I 100% deserving. I mean, for me personally, anyway, that track's nuts, and I love the build up. I love the progression and the payoff. I mean, I can't put into words just how good that distorted guitar is, and why it works.
It's the X factor.
It just does. I think it is.
Yeah.
It just works, and even the Wild Western bit as well that's going on as well. There's again elements of different tracks all merging into one.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it's like merge everything together. Like, this is too good.
No,
this is too good. You can't be this good at a track.
I mean, I definitely like it. Like, I want to make that clear. Like, I definitely like it. It's not one of my higher up. There are other tracks I'd rather listen to than Time Splitters, but you know, I can see why. But and to be fair, like that electric guitar part at the end, I think the first time I heard it surprised me as well. Because I mean, when I first heard it, I heard it while playing the game, and I was like, "Fucking hell, this track's long!" But it's not long in the sense that it's doing the same thing. It's long because it keeps changing. Okay, let's finally bring this up because I kind of avoided it until now, and I knew it's because it was at number 6, and that's Ruined King. For me personally, like this was probably the only game series on this entire list where I was like, had no strong feelings either way. It was just like, it's there. You know, and I think out of all the games on this list, this might be the one where I personally need to play the game to have some context. The rest of it, probably not. But this one, I think, and I have watched the trailer for this game, and it does look pretty fun, so I think I'm going to check it out. But I really, 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 I think one of these tracks, it was either the Ruined King or the other one before this. Like, I kind of liked, but the rest of it did nothing for me. So I was like really curious as to, did you play the game and you heard all the music while playing it, or was it a case of you then heard the music and then played the game?
So this is an interesting one because this, there's elements of this track that play in League of Legends.
Right.
Like the MOBA. Now, Viego, this main character, is basically a character of League of Legends, and they created a whole story. Like, literally, I think it was like 2 seasons. Basically, this guy basically was the main villain, I suppose.
Yeah.
And there's also elements of like stuff behind this as well. So his thing is rooted in all of League of Legends. Now, there's a lot of trailers, a lot of cinematics. Their animation is nuts, by the way. And I watched all of the cinematics, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing!" And those like that piano piece, the dark bit, a lot of that is very reminiscent of this character.
Yeah.
And then they brought out of the blue, like literally no one even knew this fucking thing was coming. The Airship Syndicate basically created this game called Ruined King. Out of the blue, as far as anyone was concerned. I'm sure there's lots of people who knew it was coming, but they kind of like teased it, and they said, "Yeah, we're making an RPG." And like, that's unlike them. Yeah, they make MOBAs.
Yeah.
They make League of Legends. Everyone knows League of Legends. And then they changed the formula and they created an RPG, and it was all around the backstory of the Ruined King, and then kind of like what happened between League of Legends and then the Sustenance of Light, and then this theme keeps recurring. And every single time, I mean, in this list, you'll see there's 4 tracks, and each one gets more epic, grandiose, and it starts to combine elements of the previous track. And when you get to the reason why this is so high up is it combines all of the 3 tracks before it. There's a ridiculously haunting violin. I mean, it is the most haunting violin. I mean, you take Necropolis Towns and Deja, like that haunting violin. This turns up to like 25. It's so deep that it's insane. Like it hits a chord with me.
Yeah.
And then you combine it with the theme. It's like it's a very much a Kingdom Hearts or a Detroit Become Human, that kind of melody going on. And it's like, for me, it's like, imagine Detroit Become Human with that theme that I love and fucking adore, and then stick a violin on top of it. Fuck it, stick a cello on top of it as well. And then let's do a panpipe. And it's like, they combine fucking everything into this god tier track.
Yeah.
For me, it's like everything I love about this style of music. Ori, it's got elements of Ori in there, and it's like the same kind of behind theme that's going on with Ori, the very emotional music going on. It's got the Detroit Become Human on there going on. It's got violins that are like from Godfall, and it's like that. I in good conscience, I cannot put any lower than 6. The only reason it's not higher is because fucking Rivalon is amazing. It's the only reason they got knocked off that next spot. I mean, this could have easily been a top track of all time for me. Like, it is that fucking good. And all the other tracks are like very good. Don't get me wrong. Like, I prefer them to like the Oris and stuff that were before it.
Yeah.
But they don't have all of the bits combined, and that's where Ruined King or The Ruined King kind of just combines everything. It is like, Ori meets a little bit of Stronghold going on. You got a little bit of Detroit Become Human going on. It's like Godfall going on with the violins. It's nuts. Honestly, it's hard to put into words just how much I love that track, and it pierces.
Yeah.
Literally, when I first heard this track, literally crying.
Yeah.
Literally crying, like streaming. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, and me, Mr. Heartless, being like, oh, fuck this game.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it is a case. Maybe there is a connection that you need to have. I mean, I do have the connection because I've watched all of the League of Legends. I've played the game twice.
But the weird thing is I watched the trailer for this game, and the trailer track is completely different. No,
it's dark,
and I'm like,
it's dark.
So that's why it's kind of piqued my interest, because it is kind of it's got that kind of like over the top.
Look at this way: the intro to this song, or the intro to the game, you'll hear it, and you might then start to understand like the melody part of it. And maybe it's just because I have a connection that you don't to it. I don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you. But I think even if I didn't watch it, I couldn't not put it where it is, if that makes sense. Like, there's, even though I have the connection with the game, and then I don't really have the nostalgia for League of Legends. I've never really played League of Legends. I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
And I have dabbled in it. But it's just all of the instruments going on. It's just all the instruments I like anyway. And then put in a way that's just haunting, like to the bone.
Yeah.
And then coupled with a beautiful melody that's like easily could be from Kingdom Hearts or Detroit, or even Mass Effect 3. You know, that kind of similar type of melody that's going on that's very intertwined with the game.
Yeah, for sure.
And then stick that cello and a violin on top of it as well, and it's like you got everything.
Yeah, I think this is...
Even the epicness at the end. Like, that last little bit is just mad.
Yeah. I think this is something that I need to, like, listen to again, firstly. But I think this is a game that I do need to check out, because, like...
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I think you'd enjoy it. It's like, so up your street, and... it's a really good game on the merit of just it being a game. You don't even need to know the backstory.
Yeah, I mean,
because it tells you everything anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's something that I will be looking at doing at some point. And then, we're finally going to talk about Divinity Original Sin 2. The entire time, I'm like, that fucking track that he's going to put... There's a track that... And I didn't expect so much Divinity Original Sin 2, but... I
could have easily put the entire list on this. Like, the entire soundtrack could easily go on this list.
I'll be honest.
Very easily.
Until you said earlier that you kind of knew what your top 3 were, I actually thought this was your top 1 for the longest time. Yeah.
Oh, I did. When I first started this thing, I'm like, Rivalon's probably going to be the number 1. Probably. Almost certainly. I was surprised, but it wasn't, by other tracks that just came in and be like, yeah, okay, these are just... I mean, maybe anything other than that.
I mean, Rivalon's just fucking... That's a track that it hits all the right buttons for me as well. Like,
It's too short. My only gripe, if I was to pick one single gripe, it's a big gripe. Too short.
Yeah, but it's
And
fucking.
then we'll talk about 4 afterwards because obviously that answers the question.
But like it's I really like when this plays like in the game. Like obviously outside the game, I like this track anyway. But I like when this plays in game because when Divinity Original Sin 2 is a fucking mad game. Like there is so much shit going on, and so like and the craziness of it. And then you get to like I don't know if the town's called Riverlon. I can't remember what the town's actually called.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And you get there, and you know whatever, and this just plays, and it's like so calming compared to the rest of the shit that's going on, and it's like. It's just I don't know. Yeah, it's just fucking great. Like I really like this track.
There's nothing I don't. This track I could literally stick on repeat for a whole day.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even bat an eye. I wouldn't be like, fuck, I need to turn this off. It's getting annoying. It never gets annoying. It's so good. And there's also 2 versions of this song. Both versions would stay at 5, 100%, without fail. Light just pinches out because it's a little bit more heartfelt, and that again strikes a chord with me.
Yeah.
I think Levi, you would prefer the heavier version, the normal version, because I think it's a smidge longer, and I think there's just a little bit more going on with the track. But for me, it's the heartfelt bit, the emotional connection I have. With
where does the other
Light
version play then? Because this sounds like the version.
Oh, it's the same versions. I think the normal version's the one you hear in the game. The Light version, I think, happens right at the end of that area.
Right. Okay. Well, I will definitely.
I think from memory.
I will definitely go and listen to both of them because I can't remember. Because
it's
hearing
very hard. Like a real one of my biggest conundrums was which one do I put in here, or do I put both and be like, fuck it. But
that's what I would have done.
Me, Light. Yeah, I know. I probably should have, but
no.
I decided to pick one. I chose Light because it just struck a chord deeper than the other. But they're both nuts. Out of this world.
That brings me on to like number 4, Baldur's Gate 3 Dreamwalk, because it was so weird hearing this. I'm like, it's the same fucking instruments.
I tell you what, I literally cried.
Yeah.
When I first heard this track. Baroslavstov just does it, right? Every now and then he'll just pop out a track. I'm like, I'll check this one out. And I'm like, it's Riverlon. He's fucking done Riverlon. He's fucking redone my favourite track from Divinity Original Sin 2. The fuck? And then it keeps going. I'm like, he's fixed my problem. He's fixed my fucking problem. With Riverlon, it's too short. And then he adds an upbeat bit, and I'm like, it keeps going. He just keeps going. This is the best track ever. And it just keeps getting better and better and better. And I'm like, fuck me. Mate, I am so excited for Baldur's Gate 3. Now, here's the ultimate tease. When he uploaded this track, he put in brackets instrumental.
No, it's going to have words.
And I'm like, is this fucker going to put vocals on top of this fucking track? Because if he does, you can scrap the list. This one's going in number 1. This track with vocals, the one thing that's missing from this track is probably like a harpy, the harpy theme, like, or something like that. I mean, if he makes another track that's grander than Dreamwalk, I don't know what to do. And I'll probably only find out when we do the game, when we play it together. So if you hear me, either just walk off and like you don't even hear me for like 5 minutes, or weeping.
You're right, boss.
That'll be why. Yeah. He'll have done it, and he'll have completed my life.
Here's the fun thing for me, right? Is that I'm more curious about hearing the soundtrack than I am the game itself. And that's not to say that I don't want it, because the game will probably be great. But that's how much I like Divinity soundtrack. I mean, I fucking love Divinity Original Sin 2. But I'm more curious about the battle themes and all this other stuff because, you know, Divinity really hit all the right fucking, like, again, that picking your instrument, having those different versions. If that's at least, you know, at least on par with Divinity, then I'll be more interested in. I'll be like, fuck the quest. Let's just go to new areas. I want to hear the music, you know. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to. And I really like Dreamwalk. I don't know if for me I'd put Riverlon above this, but I definitely was like, this is a really, really great piece of music. And it's so weird hearing them back to back. I was like, It's the same fucking instruments. I was like, mate, all you've done is rearrange the fucking notes. Like, it's so similar, and
I made it longer and made it more epic.
Yeah.
And like, yeah.
It's not exactly the same, but like you can definitely. It's definitely like he's gone.
Well, it's inspired by 100%. It's very much like I say. If Divinity Original Sin 2 and Baldur's Gate had a baby and a love child in the form of a track, it would be Dreamwalk.
And then,
yeah, I mean, for me, it's wow,
mental.
Wow.
And then followed up by, I think, probably one of my biggest surprise in terms of just placement. Fucking Stronghold was at number 3 with Under an Old Tree. Like I know exactly what I mean. You said, it's the flute, it's that just everything hits for you. But I did not see Stronghold being this high up this list, and I think that was not the song per se, but the actual placement of it was kind of crazy to me. Like over that Baldur's Gate and Divinity track. Like I would like. What is it then about this track for you that puts it above the last 2 tracks?
Everything.
There we
Everything
go.
about this track is insane. Like orchestrally, it sounds. It's a decent length. You've got a lot of instrumentation going on. I think the style of it's like Castle Jam, but then turned up to 11 or 12. They've got the flute going on that it's never overpowering, but it's there. It's so good. You got the mandolins going on. You got the backing track of 2 mandolins. You've got the jamminess, the sort of upbeatness of Castle Jam, and then you've got the flutes. You've got the under-tight ice. The mandolins go fucking mental in this one. It's such a complete track, and I love the style that it goes for. It's gorgeous. Like, wow, what a track! I mean, when I created the list and when I had my top 3, I'm like, these 3 tracks that are like 3, 2, and 1 never changed. Once they were there, no track that I ever put in there could compete with them.
Yeah.
Every single time I'd be like, yeah, these tracks are nuts. Like the emotion that Strongholds Under an Old Tree purveys is oof.
I mean, it does a very good job of being exactly what it needs to be done. If you want to make a medieval piece of music, it does a very good job of basically being that. And like I like the idea of again, the Castle Jam's more of like your kind of like fair music. There's shit going on, everyone's jolly. This is more like an average day in a medieval place, but that's not to say it's worse or anything. It's just that's the vibe I get from it. And I like the way that Stronghold does its music. So when like combat's happening, it goes to this really fucking that crazy music, and then as soon as the combat's gone, music stops for a little bit, and then this or Castle Jam or something else comes in, and it's like, wow, this is nice and chill now, and you got your people like farming away and stuff. And I think it's I don't know if it's the same composer on all the Stronghold games, but the person that's done Stronghold 1 really, really, really knew how to nail that medieval England vibe very, very well.
Yeah. Robert L. Uvino.
Yeah, I would be interested to see if he's done anything, if he's been on the other ones, whether he's still part of Firefly or whatever. But yeah, I mean, Firefly need to take a look at this soundtrack and really a good hard look about a lot of things actually, and really understand why this game is so good on many levels. But like musically, it's also good. I mean, to be fair, some of the other games probably do have good music. I cannot remember though. But I feel like this is
not even close. In my opinion, not even close. Not even close.
There we go. That answers that question. All right, and then number 2 is Heroes 4. Like again, didn't expect so much Heroes 4. I will say, I think this is a great example of a track that basically combined everything that you liked. I was like hearing it, and I know in the video you said, "Oh, I haven't picked up on the Stronghold connection, similar to the last track." I wasn't really thinking that at the time. I was thinking just the folk side of it, like less medieval and more folky, I think is what I was going for.
It's a different version.
Yeah.
And my only gripe with this track is it's far too fucking short. Really annoying. Because if that was like another minute and a half, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect track. It's just too short, but there's so much going on. It's basically Under an Old Tree with different, like, crazy instrumentation. Like, they've literally turned it up to 12 in terms of the instrumentation's a little bit more out there, a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Oriental, maybe? A little bit more unique, a little bit more out there-ish. And the sounds it creates, it's very Irish again. It comes back to that Irish theme, sort of very Celtic, folky.
Yeah.
And it's just so much going on. I got the vocals going on. It's mental. I cannot put into words just how powerful that track is to me personally. I mean, crying when I first heard this would be an understatement. I was like bawling.
Where does this play? Like, I'm just genuinely curious. Where does this actually play? Is this just an overworld tune?
No, it's when you sail.
Oh, really?
I'm seeing on water. It's whenever you sail around, or you're on a boat, this track plays, and my God, it's like I always remember. To be fair, I didn't realize it was based on tile set.
Yeah.
Until I started playing the tracks, it was actually Heroes 2 and 3 that maybe connect the dots. Because in Heroes 2 and 3 they literally call it dirt, grass, snow, desert. I'm like, oh, okay, so it's a desert tile set. I'm with you.
Yeah,
that's when the different music kicks in. Obviously outside of the towns themselves. In Heroes 4, they call it hope, desolation, and like floating on water or whatever random names of tracks. But it's the same principle. I started, that's when I kind of like, oh, I get it. So when you go on grass, I think hope. When you go on dirt, I think desolation. And then when you go on water, it's floating on water. And I always remember going on water and being like, fucking hell, what a cracking track. I never made the connection until like afterwards. And I'm like, oh, the penny's dropped now. Now I'm a little bit older and understand it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I get it. But fuck, it's insane. And it's very mermaidy as well. I think they kind of bring in a very mermaidy type of feel.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, if nothing else, I'm very curious about playing this game again. Because I remember the game, vaguely, but I don't remember the music going this hard, like, at all. Like, and it's such a difference between Heroes 3 and... Heroes 3 is very epic sounding, but it doesn't necessarily go, like, as hard as Heroes 4 does. Like, Heroes 4, like, it's almost like they've gone... We need like 50 more musicians for these tracks, and they've just gone shoved way more stuff in the music. Whereas like Heroes 3, it was like, yeah, you got like 10 people playing. It's almost like they've gone from 10 people to 20 people. It's so weird hearing these tracks and being like, holy shit, like they really, the production just went up massively.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's the same guys that did all of the Heroes tracks.
Yeah.
So they've stayed with every single game, as far as I can tell. I'm not sure about the later series. I have to double check, but definitely up to Heroes 4, they did all of the soundtracks for every game.
Yeah.
Same 3 people. Let me check. It was Paul Romero, Rob King, and Steve Backer did all 3 soundtracks. All 4 soundtracks.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just an insane track. It really is. And I think Heroes 3, Heroes 1 and 2, actually, all 3 of those, they have a very orchestral feeling, but it's a very generic orchestral feeling, like the usual instruments you'd expect to hear in an orchestra. Whereas in Heroes 4, they kind of go down like a Celtic route, and they use a very unique set of woodwind instruments, a very unique type of guitar, very like, I don't even know what kind of instruments they use, so I couldn't even tell you, but it's a very different feel.
Yeah. And
it just hits harder.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell.
And yeah. Considering Heroes Stronghold HD under an old tree and Heroes 4 floating across water, very similar tracks. The thing that won Heroes 4 was the instrumentation, because it was just that uniqueness that it just hit with me.
Yeah, like it's really quite refreshing hearing Heroes 4. Like it was definitely not what I was expecting it to be. Like, you know, like it's not a game I would think of when I was thinking of like music, but now like hearing it, I'm like, I feel like these guys probably didn't get enough credit for this at the time, because nobody talks about this soundtrack, to my knowledge. It's not something that comes up. People always talk about Heroes 3. They probably talk a little bit of Heroes 2, but Heroes 3 is always the thing, you know, because people remember the gameplay and they remember the music from that. But like Heroes 4, like hearing these tracks, I'm like, wow, like they kind of went all out here. They kind of just were like, nah, fuck it, we're going balls to the wall. Which, you know, don't blame them.
Really glad they did. Really glad they did.
And then that leads us to number 1, Elder Scrolls Online, 3 Hearts of Fire. This just combines everything you like. There was a fucking rock guitar in there. There's like orchestrated parts. There's a really strong melody. I was like, when I heard it from start to finish, I was like, right, I get it. Like everything that you've put on this list, I was like, I get it. Like, you know, and like, I don't know if I felt overly strongly about it, but I appreciated the fact that there was like guitar, violin, you know, fucking just everything, like a drum in there, like, you know, it just kind of was like, this is it. Powerful is a good way of describing that track. Just very powerful, and I think that's. I was like, right, okay. So, was this something? Because I know you've played a little bit of Elder Scrolls Online in the past, haven't you?
I've never played Somerset.
Oh, you know, okay, yeah, right, yeah.
So this was purely a research. Like, so this track, it plays in a trailer, and I remember hearing the trailer like, what the fuck is this track? I could never find it. Never. Well, it took me ages to find it. In the end, I mean, I ended up doing it, you know, on this research. I'm like, oh, found you.
Yeah.
That's where you're from. But yeah, interestingly, it's the Nevenstar theme, which is from Morrowind. It might be even before then. Keeps coming back, and every time it's in, it's you can hear it in Skyrim, Dragonborn. You can hear it in there. You can hear it in I think even Paradise Has Shadows makes a turn there, and then this track as well. It does it so seamlessly. Couple that with, I think, possibly the best intro to any video game track ever. Like, those vocals come in from the first second you hit that play button, and fucked, they hit emotion. I mean, wow, just wow. And then you're just bashed in the face with the guitar that is next level. And then you got the drums. They start putting violins in it, and and then it's like, it's a very symmetrical track. So you've got extremely powerful intro with vocals. You got a very powerful guitar. Then the drums come in. You get like a massive orchestral piece, which is godlike. Then somewhere in the middle, a couple of times, staggered, is this Nevenstar theme, which is so iconic to the Elder Scrolls. I mean, Elder Scrolls from 3, maybe before that. It's basically the main theme, essentially, for Elder Scrolls. Which is just, I mean, that Nevenstar theme is so amazing. It's so iconic. It's like Halo, you know? It's hard to put into words, it just works. And that Nevenstar theme is just like out of this world, insanely good. So it combines that with everything else that's going on in the track. And then it outros the same way it intros, and it's like, and then you got the drums right at the end, and it's like, it is such a complete track. It, like, orchestrally is, it's an insane piece. I mean, fair play to, who was it that did this one? It was Brad Derrick and Jeremy Soule. They created what I consider the best piece of music ever made. Yeah. In my opinion. For video game music, anyway. I
definitely wasn't expecting the guitar like that. I think when I knew that, like, number 1 was going to be something like pretty fucking epic. Like, it was either going to go one or two ways. It was going to be really epic or really heartfelt. Then we went the epic way, but I think the added guitar really made the difference to this for me. Where it was like, I think without it, I think I would have been far harder on it. But I like the fact that it was like, hey, we've got an orchestra, or we've got a string section, all this. Let's add the guitar in. Let's give it that extra, like, it's like the fucking flavor to the food, you know? It just gives it all that kind of spiciness to it, which is what it, what you need, something to really punch through. You know, if you were gonna have a number 1 track, like, why is it number 1? What is it that makes it special? And like you've just described, you have that the vocals into this track that builds quite a lot and then is ended with the vocals again, and it's yeah, the guitar really kind of sold all of that for me. It's like the little bow on top of the present. That's how I describe it.
100%. It's like the mix to your Bombay Bad Boy, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, not something I didn't even see coming. Like, I think, you know,
I didn't. When I found this track, I was like, my God.
And I mean,
what a track.
You know, I think when I started this list, I think Rivallon probably would have been the one that I thought would have been at number 1. Obviously, the entire time I was like, Diablo will be on here. Not the case. And we talked about that, and you were like, it doesn't really do it for me. And I think for me, I was just like, Diablo's guitar playing. It's like, it's gotta be on the list, you know. So
I'd say it's not a really good piece of music. And had this been an iconic list, 100%. I mean, that would be near the top. It is literally that good in terms of like iconicness, but for me, it doesn't hit the right chords. And I think maybe it goes too far in the gothic way in terms of it's too dark and doesn't quite hit.
Yeah, I'd say I'm the opposite, where I think it's really like spooky and haunting, but for all the right reasons. But I think it's just because of that guitar playing on it and stuff. But you know, it is what it is. It's just a track that I just in my head had made up, being like, it's gonna be on this list, you know. And like I said, that Rivallon, and then I think Foregone Destruction was the other one. I think those are the 3 tracks that I was like, absolutely. Everything else was like, yeah, makes sense. So I wasn't sure about Borderlands, and then once you put that on, I was like that. And I do think overall, I think this is a really good, like, diverse list of tracks. I think this is a really good place for people if they were looking to hear multiple styles and hear stuff that's not only upbeat but, you know, heartfelt and darker. I think you have a very good mix of tracks in total here, and they're obviously, like, for me there was a lot of big surprises. DKC, Emperor, Battle for June, anything from Time Splitters and stuff, but I think that's kind of what makes it fun. And obviously you've pretty much tried to detach any kind of either nostalgia or, you know, the game from it. You're like, I'm trying to listen to these as tracks rather than like having some kind of connection to it, which is very difficult to do. I find very difficult to do, because like if I play something like DKC or Unreal Tournament, that stuff's ingrained in my head. I can't necessarily detach that, whereas like some of this stuff I was like, or at least Ruin King is probably the one where I like, I think I'm going to play the game, because if that ends up complementing the visuals, then I think I will then start to like it more in that experience. Whereas some of these other tracks on this list that you had, like the Baldur's Gate stuff and some of the other tracks, like fucking some of the Elder Scrolls stuff and the Ori and the Blind Forest stuff that I hadn't heard, like I could go away and listen to that without necessarily needing to play the game. But I think Ruin King's probably the one where I'm like, okay, this is, you know, the thing where I think if I want to really appreciate this, I think I do need a little bit more context. So that's just a personal preference.
Sure.
But overall, I mean, you're obviously happy with this list. This has been something you've been working on for a very long time. You know, like we've joked about and said about revisiting our own personal list in, like, you know, 5-6 years time. Is that something you think you will actually do? Because it is obviously a lot of work.
I think definitely. I mean, the benefit we have now, obviously, is we've already done the foundation.
Yeah, for sure.
So a lot of the hard work of like whittling it down from literally thousands to 100 has been done, and then it's just a case of tweaking, adding things that, you know, new games that, you know, at the time weren't released, you know, that type of thing. And also, like, I haven't heard every single track ever made, and I'm sure there are tracks in there that were on my, like, maybe not typical rotation, but things that I downloaded and, you know, I lost the file or something like that, or whatever might have happened. I'm like, I'll check that out later, or come back to that one, and forgot about it. I think there's a Heroes 4 track I might have missed completely in error, but I don't think it would have impacted like the top 50. But it might have impacted like the bottom 50, you know, the 50 to 100. So, you know, fair enough, I suppose. And, you know, my taste may well change in 5-6 years' time. You know, what I like now might be slightly different. I might like more of the heavier stuff, or I might prefer some of the moodier stuff, or the darker stuff. I don't really know. Plus, yeah, I say in 5 years' time, even there's probably hundreds of games that we would have played that actually, there's tracks on there that we really like. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth something. Definitely worth something I would do again, maybe in 5, 6 years' time. Um, yeah, maybe we'll do it on the decade 2030 or something.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Well, thank you for sitting here and chatting to me about this for like basically almost 3 hours. Like I didn't think it was going to take that long, but I'm glad that we, sit here and talk and kind of understand your selection on things and stuff like that. But before we wrap things up, do you want to just give people like a rundown of like where they can find you and what you do?
Yeah, certainly. So you can find me at youtube.com/donHaize, DonHaize. I also have a Twitter and Facebook, again, donHaize. So yeah, feel free to find me there. I basically do a lot of video game content, similar to Levi, I suppose, but I do more of the Let's Play style videos. I also create cinematic movies. Not me, but I create like compilation videos, I should say, of movies and games. And occasionally the odd musical thing. Sometimes it's tracks I like. Sometimes I've done a couple of sort of more trancey type things where it's like a compilation of video and like just a backing track going on. And yeah, just a couple of other discussion stuff as well. So feel free to check me out if that's of interest to you guys. It's all video game stuff basically. So if you're into video games, then probably there's something on my channel you'll enjoy. Hopefully.
Let's not forget that
as long as you can put up with me and my voice.
You're a fucking workhorse, man. The amount of stuff you upload is insane to me. It's like Jesus. Yeah, I'll put all that information.
All work, no play.
Yeah, definitely. I will make sure I put all that information down below, so the channels, the Facebook, Twitter, all of that good stuff, so you guys can get an easy access to it. Hopefully, everyone who's been watching this, I know it's been a very, very long video. You've enjoyed it. If you like it, like. If you want to see more content, maybe we should do more discussion stuff like we used to again. That'd be kind of fun. But we're very busy people. So obviously hit subscribe if you want to see more of that. And then, links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below as always. And it's goodbye from me. And it's goodbye from this guy.
Ciao, ciao for now.